pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We begin with our acceptance of our agenda. Are there any additions or modifications to our agenda?
Two that
We added that one. You saw that, right?
No.
About the student liaison.
Oh, you put that in?
Yep.
It wasn't in when I went through the agenda.
We did it earlier today.
Oh. And then the other
4.3.
one is the plan for shared decision-making that I mentioned to Maria that I think we need to get it on the agenda.
Right. I think Chris thought we could talk about that. It wasn't like a specific agenda item because there wasn't anything, because there is a policy for that, I think is what Chris had said.
Okay. I think it should be an agenda item.
Can we?
It's a plan that's due to the state that we haven't approved in over 2 years, so we're late on that. So I think we need to have a record of it as an agenda item.
It would be reflected in the minutes. We could include it as a discussion item that would fall in. Under 12.1, we could add it to 12.1.
Okay.
Thanks.
Can I have a motion then to accept tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is that, do we not get five?
The modified agenda. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Is that, I didn't hear 5-0. Did you?
Yeah, I
Yeah, okay.
didn't do it very loudly.
Okay.
I did vote yes.
Thank you. All right, and we'll move on to Dr. Harrison's report.
Good evening, everyone. To begin, I think it's always kind of tradition to acknowledge our budget vote at this meeting, and I want to thank everyone in the community who supported the proposed budget, and it was approved by approximately 69% of our voters, and I think it's certainly a good day for our kids and our community as it provides numerous opportunities to enrich student learning while maintaining our facilities and continuing to support our many exceptional programs. So a big thank you to our community for supporting the proposed budget for next school year. On the front of district administrative news, there's been two very important communications that I've sent out over the past 2 weeks. And first, I shared the departure of Randy Lichtenwallner, our Dow's Lane principal, who resigned to accept the position in another district. And we certainly will miss Randy and wish him well. But then on Wednesday, I shared some exciting news that tonight the Board of Education will appoint our very own Deb Marinello, who's sitting in the audience, hi Deb, as the next principal of Dow's Lane. We had the real pleasure of welcoming Deb to the district in 2012 as an assistant principal, working both at Dow's and the high school. And then to aid in the transition with Dr. Mosenthal retiring after 38 years here at the high school, we relied heavily on Deb to guide our school through that difficult transition. And now that there is an opportunity available, I think Deb is going to come home to her roots at the elementary level, where she has a deep set of experiences that certainly are going to help lead our school community well. So we look forward to acknowledging and appointing Deb tonight. To find someone to fill her shoes up at the high school, of course, will be a difficult challenge. We've already begun our search, and we've received in a short period of time. So I think the announcement went out Wednesday. The posting went up right after that. We already have approximately 100 applicants for the high school assistant principalship. And it looks like we're going to have a number of excellent candidates from our early review of resumes. So we look forward to an aggressive process to identify the next assistant principal at the high school, who's going to be a good partner with our principal, Dave Cohen, certainly working with our faculty and students in the broader high school community. So congratulations, Deb. A capital project update related to our bond from October. We've been giving some periodic updates, and I have to tell you, we're still in a position where there are approximately 146 projects before the Irvington projects. So remember, we started off looking at 22 to 24 weeks, and then they went up to 40-some weeks, and now I don't even know where we're going to end up, probably in the mid-60s at some point by the time we get there. Bev's estimates will be that they're probably not even going to begin to look at our applications until at least mid-August at this time. So certainly disappointing news. I've had some conversation with folks locally that are encouraging SED to look at a bit of a different model for managing facility applications such as that by developing local teams as opposed to everything being stationed up in Albany in hopes that with boots on the ground that we may be able to get some better responses and build relationships that would help school districts accelerate their application process. Unfortunately, not any good news on that broader bond front, but we're on track to begin our work at Dow's Lane and with the district offices and school offices as soon as school gets out. I wanted to touch base on some of the recent legislation, and that as a part of the state budget, and of course tied to that was the governor's reform plan and the vast changes to APPR. We're still waiting for some clarity, and we're working with our legal guidance to fully understand and appreciate what our requirements are. It's expected that as a school district we'll have to negotiate with our bargaining unit to arrive at a new plan to evaluate teachers and principals that will align with the state standards. Currently, the plan that is out there and that's identified in law per the budget requires that school districts must have a plan submitted to SED, State Education Department, by September 1st. Then you must receive approval of your plan by November 15th. So submit September 1, approval by November 15th, and you think in that period of time there could be feedback and editing that has to occur with the state. The challenge that we have is that the regulations will not be approved until June 30th. Which leaves us with summer months to work with negotiating teachers who are not under contract at that point in time. So we're waiting for some guidance and we try to work out a plan to make sure that we are doing our diligence to achieve this objective. Failure to meet this November 15th objective, which we back into with the September 1st application deadline, is the forfeiture of additional state aid that we received this year. Last week, the Assembly passed a bill to delay those APPR implementations the following year. Certainly, we're going to look for the other house to consider that legislation and to see where it goes. But we're starting to charge ahead with that mindset that we have to have this resolved by September 1st. And of course, we'll be optimistic that our teachers will partner with us on this effort. I do want to acknowledge our students in the science research program. Last Tuesday, they had held the annual Science Research Symposium, which was another wonderful event that was hosted here on the campus. Not only did we get to see presentations from two of our outstanding seniors graduating from the program who have won multiple awards for their work, but we got to see the display boards in the early stages of research from our underclassmen that are in the program. And we had the great fortune to welcome Dr. Lisa Saran Armagon, who is a professor at Fordham University and is an Irvington resident with children in the community, and her eldest at Dow's. And she gave a great overview of the work that she's doing in biomedical sciences and research related to stem cells at this point in time. So it was a great night to acknowledge the work of our students, who certainly were very, very impressive. I also want to acknowledge a couple of our custodians here at the high school, Rich Vittori and Pete Fetzer, who were recently acknowledged by being granted an American Dreamer Award by BOCES. The American Dreamer Award has been given to a few other folks in our district over the years. Dr. Kaur received it one year, Ms. Chapnick received it another year. And really what it is, it's looking for non-BOCES employees who assist in their commitment to providing quality education to all students, particularly those with special needs. So I think it really says something to the unique nature of our community here to see two of our custodians being acknowledged in this fashion, and we certainly want to acknowledge and congratulate Rich and Pete for their work. And then a couple of upcoming events this week that we do want to highlight. That tomorrow we have tomorrow's Historians History Research Symposium in this room at 7 p.m. Encourage folks to come out and see the work of our students in the history front. And then on Thursday, we have the Middle School Junior Honor Society induction. So the calendar is loaded with big events over the next month, so we hope everyone stays dialed into school announcements and the weekly This Week newsletter, because there's so many great things that I'd hate to see folks miss them.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so we move on to our main presentations, which include a follow-up on the meeting that we had on May 5th, where we were discussing, it was not an agenda item at that time. Tonight, obviously, we have made it an agenda item because of the importance of the discussion that emerged from that meeting. This is a follow-up discussing the Latin program and our health course that has been proposed to move into a ninth grade requirement, which of course it already is a requirement to graduate with health. That is an unavoidable requirement. We have, as a district administration, proposed that health move to ninth grade, and we're going to have a follow-up on that discussion tonight. I'll turn it to Dr. Harrison to kind of lead us off in that discussion and explain some of the pieces of information that may not have been as crystal clear on May 5th.
Sure. I'll give a general overview and then invite my colleagues and Dr. Kaur and, of course, our high school administrators to chime in as appropriate. And I guess I want maybe frame it a little differently, if I may, in that it's not a new requirement for this year. In looking to developing our school schedule for this year and looking at the programming offerings, and we're talking for 14-15, we added a writing course that is a half-year writing course, and in doing so, we look to partner that with another course, because it's a half-year course that meets on an every other day, A day, B day basis. And in doing so, we looked at another need that we had, which was our health course, which is a graduation requirement. We had a number of students that were taking it at different points in their high school career. Some taking it early on, some taking it later in their studies. And we saw this as a mating with that course that would not only allow students to be able to get this course done early on, but it was also an opportunity for our students to have a wider array of experiences down the road. We also saw instances where we had some of our students that were having difficulty fitting the health credit in as they got later on in their high school years in trying to fulfill the graduation requirements. Thinking about health as a subject, and we think about the challenges that our students face, it seems appropriate that we provide health instruction at the freshman level when we think about the risks and dangers of drug, alcohol, tobacco use, and other related subjects that see a lot of value in beginning to look at that being delivered in a real developmentally appropriate environment where we look at students in ninth grade so you can have a more coherent level of instruction. In doing so, some concerns came about that there was presenting restrictions for our students to be able to take Latin and potentially other electives during their freshman year. We attempted at the last meeting to try to clarify some of those concerns. In doing so, we shared with the board that what our trend enrollment has been for Latin 1, which for this year we saw 51 students enroll in the course, or 51 students request the course, and 46 actually enroll in the course. Our requests at this point in time look very, very strong, looking at 76 or 77 students at this point in time, and we're in the process of scheduling those students now at the high school. To give additional flexibility to students, because of the writing health combination that was introduced for the 14-15 school year, an additional section of Latin was added to the school day 10th period to be able to try to accommodate our students' interests and needs. We certainly are seeing strong enrollment to this point in Latin, and we're not realizing that from what we've seen, significant impacts. There was some question as to whether the course was a requirement or whether it was a recommendation, and we certainly are encouraging students to take the course. We recognize that students, depending on what their needs and their situations are, may have limitations in their ability to take health because of other needs. We're strongly recommending it, but we're not saying that it's necessarily a requirement. Our high school administration and guidance department is working very closely with families. We have our parent meetings coming up for our rising freshmen, our current 8th graders, to go through course requests and to make some decisions regarding scheduling. And we are going to make certain efforts to be able to accommodate what students' needs are through that process. That said, I would certainly invite Raina or Dave, if there's anything that I did not cover that you think is worth mentioning.
So the board will have some questions, I'm sure, but just to be clear, it sounds to me like the key phrasing that you used is the nature of strongly suggesting, because how that's communicated to a student or to a family is kind of critical to the limitation that may be inherent in having to take health as opposed to something else. But it sounds like there is some flexibility.
Yeah, we're going to try to work. We want our students to have the best possible experiences they can. We can speak to examples where there's been concerns with students not being able to really fit that health credit in. We think about the developmental nature of teaching health. So we see a lot of benefits to having it early in a student's career. We look at students that have some limitations in their scheduling because they may have 504 or IEP requirements that it may not be able to happen. So there's a need for some flexibility. We strongly encourage, and I think the word that I used when I wrote the board about this recently is that we're strongly recommending it. But we're going to be responsive to student needs. Dave and Deb are working closely with the guidance counselors to ensure the proper messaging occurs during those meetings.
Okay. Questions, board members?
Do the community?
Well, it's technically they're supposed to wait until after the other two presentations, which are both related to the high school. But I think we want to do board members first. That's what we typically do.
Okay. Well, one of the things that came up in the discussion, and it's hard to completely evaluate them separately, was the required English class as well. And I know that you've said in the past that it's hard to evaluate a class effectively in a year, but has there been any thought to perhaps maybe not making that a requirement also and giving kids the option to opt into the English class, or where do we stand on the English class?
So, I mean, I can answer that, and if Dave also wants to add, I guess what I would say is that it's not even a year. It was 8 months when we first started talking about this last month. And I think that when we implement something, if we're going to implement with fidelity, we need to give something a chance to make a decision, rather than make a decision not to do it a certain way. I think, and I know that I've shared this at our curriculum committee meeting, that we've made progress in different areas, and maybe they're not the most measurable at this moment, but for instance, the work of the English and Social Studies and Science departments working together so that students are bringing their content area writing to their writing course to get feedback on informational writing. So there are a lot of components to this course, and I guess I would just say, and I say this from the seat I sit in, I don't see that implementing something and then in 8 months just turning around and feeling like we should change it is necessarily a good path for us. I think if we've made the commitment, then yes, we want to measure it, But I think we need to also give it a chance. We have teachers who are implementing it for the first time. We have students that are taking it for the first time. And so I guess what I would suggest is, no, I don't think changing course before you've actually had a chance to implement something thoroughly and deeply is good practice for us. But again, I'm sharing that from my point of view. I think if we've committed to it, then we should make a commitment to it and see it through before we make a decision whether it's good or not.
Did you want to elaborate?
I mean, I just really want to second that. I think that, you know, we sat here certainly a year, a little over a year ago, going through a very detailed process and a commitment to wanting to add a writing program at the high school. And certainly I think we're open to assessing it, but to suggest now that it's time to move course, I think would be very premature.
Before we move off the writing course wasn't technically an agenda item tonight. I mean, it's a very important topic. You can direct the administration to take a different approach with writing, but I just want to make sure, are there any other questions related to the health class in particular, that, because I was kind of separating those two?
I don't understand your statement that it wasn't part of the agenda, because this paper that we got, the backside is about writing.
It just says discussion on Latin.
I'm sorry, but I actually read the backside, which is all about writing, so I don't understand.
It's just the agenda that,
Sorry, but
the agenda item that's on here, John, is,
but what is this paper then about,
that was backup that Dr. Harrison provided
for
us.
this agenda item?
Well, it was out of a result of the May 5th meeting that you guys had various questions that he put together that document.
Yeah, but
Let me just ask my questions. I don't understand what you're saying, honestly.
I was just confirming that there are no other questions about health in particular that you'd prefer to talk about.
Let me think about this. When are we going to address the writing issue then?
I was going to come to that later in the discussion, but we can, if you'd prefer to
No,
talk.
that's fine. I'm happy to segment it if you want to do that.
Okay.
But, I want to understand what strongly recommend means when you say high school. I mean, what are the circumstances under which a student could not take health? Is it just somebody with a 504?
Dave, do you want to speak?
No, I don't think we've spoken to that as a specific statement. I think that if a student and a family came forward and gave an example of a course that they felt that they needed to take to create sequence, or that it would fit in without having the health class, certainly we would consider that and make that available.
How about a situation where somebody, a music student in particular, who couldn't take Latin in 10th period, also wanted to take another elective such as art as well as Latin?
Well, again, I think the only way to look at that, the health class as a standalone wouldn't create that opportunity. The health class is a half-credit class. So if there is another half-credit class, or if the sequence provides for that to be done, we're open to that. But
Okay, so there really isn't, it's not physically possible now for somebody to do that now that we have the half period?
well, I mean, one of the things that we stated in the sheet is that in order for a student to be able to take art and music and Latin, that there is an option to not take a lunch period. So again, it's not what we recommend, but we realize that for some students and families, it's a decision they would want to make. And given the scenario that you're talking about, John, there certainly is a possibility to explore that.
So you would, that would be at least possible for a
Again,
student.
our goal is to provide our students with opportunities. So if there's a way to have that opportunity, then certainly we're open to it.
Can we, yeah, the rest of my points have to do with the broader picture in ELA.
About but question, just to clarify, because the agenda says we're following up from the May 5th discussion, and the May 5th discussion encompassed language too. So I maybe misunderstood the agenda item. A lot of kids stood up and talked about.
My
language
intention, just
also.
to be clear, my intention was just to separate them, because overhauling the writing course is one issue, and the fact that health has been strongly suggested. In our last meeting, we said it was a requirement. that was another issue. And I was just trying to separate them.
Oh, okay.
Because I didn't see necessarily health as being a huge problem. The bigger issue is the introduction of the writing program and what that does to students who want a wide, more freedom in terms of their electives, right?
Yeah.
And then the other issue that is not tangential is the quality of the writing program and how we evaluate that, which I know is very important. Okay, so that's what. So I just wanted to, if there's any other health-related. No. Okay.
We're talking
So
about
fine.
health.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're done. We
Well, I
can.
think we're talking about the whole, well, whatever, I'd like to know what the issue is, because I think you were trying to break things apart so that we could actually talk about something.
So health is we're.
So health, all I've heard so far is that it may be a minor scheduling issue, but health is required and it's a half, okay.
Strongly suggested.
That's right,
Right.
strongly suggested. So what is, and we've heard on the writing course that it's only been going on for 8 months, so are there questions on that, or are you making a suggestion for
I
us to
thought we
act
weren't
on something?
talking about that
Yeah,
till Philip.
we're
is-
gonna
We're
talk
talking
about
about,
that.
yeah,
So
okay.
that's
Later.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't we?
Okay, one more question on health?
Yeah, of course. That's right. Yeah.
I guess my question is, the guidance counselors always told kids they should take health if they can and get it out of the way. So is that gonna be any different moving forward, the conversation with the students, than what was done in the past? Because, as you said, the numbers were most of the kids, a lot of kids take health in 9th grade anyway. So is the conversation with the students gonna actually change from what's been going on, or is it gonna be about the same?
Well, I think there's a slight change because of certainly the half credit with the writing creates, you know, as we wrote in here, when you look at the phys ed class and when you look at the science lab, those 4 half classes combined make for 2 full periods. So I think that there's a natural inclination for us to want to have our 9th graders scheduled that way. So I think the conversation shifts slightly, and part of that is about articulation with 8th grade parents and students to be able to recognize if and what other half-credit options might be available, and if they feel that there's something that they're looking for that they can't fit in that scheme.
Have you guys, I know one of the things that Chris also mentioned is that sometimes it becomes difficult to fit in the schedule later. Are there systems in place for guidance to, like, red flag people who need things for requirements, so we don't get to the position where kids are kind of, you know, all of a sudden senior year, they don't have economics, or they don't have, do we have systems in place, or are we looking at developing systems with guidance so that things can be flagged throughout the, you know, it's very clear for students as they're scheduling throughout their 4 years of high school?
Well, I do think that that happens. I mean, there are annual meetings that take place with each guidance counselor and their students in their caseload. In some cases, in multiple years, often the parent is there with them for that, and you know, those conversations take place about the requirements and whether they've met them or whether they still may need to be met.
Can I ask a question about the health class? Is there a particular reason, there seems to be very few electives that are an A-B class, such as health. When I started the process in 9th grade with my girls, I just thought it was an odd, it was the only class, because this is predating the writing class, so it has nothing to do with that.
Right.
Has there ever been consideration to making it a half-year class, so students could marry it with another half-year class as an elective?
Most of the electives that we offer are not actually available to our freshmen. So when you look at most of our elective classes, you'll see them in science, you'll see them in social studies, you'll see them in English, and they're typically upper-level elective classes. So in fact, it's something that's going to come up in our presentation a little while. And I think that it's naturally built in because some of the quote-unquote electives that our students typically take in their 9th and 10th grade year do meet state requirements for graduation, such as art or music, the health, things like that. So I think that there's been a long history of that happening on a scheduling level here in Irvington High School, and quite frankly, in my experience, seeing it play out in many high schools. So I don't think it's out of the norm to see more opportunities play out for electives and selectives as students progress through their high school career.
Okay,
All right, so assuming they're kind of covered through health, we can turn back to the writing and the concerns about the writing program. You had questions, John, I believe, that I may have cut you off from. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to I didn't feel cut off so much, it's just not clear
Okay.
how you were proceeding.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think the issue is broader, right? And I think the issue, but look, I was one who opposed putting the writing program in the first place, and I haven't heard anything to make me change that view. I still think it's, I still, would prefer it had not been put in. The conversations that I've had, which I've had a number, since, in the last month or so, talking to people with experience in the 9th grade program, have made me think that we need to have, I think as a board, I think the board should try to get feedback from parents and students on how that program is going, what their views on it are, and do it in a systematic way rather than, just kind of somewhat random way. I already have my views on that, and what I've heard has only confirmed those, or increased those concerns about this program. I've heard about, I don't want to get into, I should probably not get into specifics about what I've heard from parents, but it's not been good. So I think, I would like to see, I think as a board, we, should have the responsibility to get our own information on that topic. And I see no reason why we can't get the information on how the current 9th graders have gone through the process. This is a program that we put in to teach people writing, not to have people be the first year of a multi-year developmental program that eventually would start teaching people writing.
Can you elaborate on what you have in mind in terms of how we would solicit that feedback?
Well, I don't know. It could be to request that people email us feedback. It could be a survey.
So not a confidential survey?
Could be no, I think confidential would be very helpful, because I think people are much more likely to share what they really think if they feel it's confidential. I think we should be getting it from students who are actually been in the program as well. And, keep in mind that people have all sorts of different axes to grind and viewpoints, but we can't hurt. At worst, we learn nothing, and I think we might well learn something. So that's what I would like to suggest. I also think there's another aspect of this whole thing that we should be considering that I've begun to be aware of. And that is how, this is actually reflects email traffic the last few weeks. There's been a lot of, is how, I guess Facebook posts too, how the existence of a writing course taking up half a 9th grade credit affects, for better or worse, our high school transcripts that we're presenting to colleges. Is it a good thing? Is it not a good thing? I've heard some concerns about that. I don't know, I don't have any, I'm not saying those lead me to be, to believe that there is a problem, but I think it leads me to believe that I don't know, and it's, I think, a legitimate question to be asking.
So that would be an additional data point.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking somebody who's presenting 4 years single credit English, and now they're saying you're doing 4.5 years of English, and almost by necessity you're going to do a half a year less of something else. Is that a good trade-off in terms of putting together a strong transcript for high school, for college? It's not obvious it would be. I've generally been skeptical that we can't teach writing given the existing amount of instruction that we had, and that, I have the same concerns about middle school ELA being a period and a half. So those are my concerns. They're not exactly questions, but I want to state concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my point of view about the board getting information from parents and students is, it's the how. And because, to get something that's really useful, we'd have to really think that through, and we would have to do that ourselves, because I think your idea is very much about doing it without the administration, because if we...
Well, I just kind of think, I would like the raw information, right.
But would you be comfortable with the administration doing that if we were provided the raw information?
Probably, I think we'd have to talk about the exact details, but probably. But, look, the other thing we could consider is having I'm not uncomfortable with that. I have to think about it a little bit. But
because it's just if we put ourselves in the position of actually having to administer it and deal with issues of confidentiality or not, it's all about how you structure it.
Right,
and
right. But we just have to think about how confidentiality, I think, is generally an important issue.
Right, and also if there's some sort of quantitative piece, you have to have a system in place so that people can't sort of keep reporting the same thing, right? You have, so there's a single...
Yeah, I don't know if it's quantitative so much as I would just love to hear people's, unfiltered.
Just on that, I mean, I have no problem with what you're suggesting at all. I think that based upon confidentiality, it would have to be a Survey Monkey type of confidential thing. And then the other thing you got to keep in mind is I don't think you can mandate it.
No, of course not.
Right. So, I mean, so you have to factor both of those into the data you receive.
Right.
But, I mean, if, I don't, unless there's a legal reason that...
Yeah. Or we could just,
I don't see any reason,
Okay.
not to do that, to after the end of the school year, figure out how it went the first year.
Or maybe right before while people are still here.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Should,
That's the extent of my comments.
okay.
And thank you for that positive reception.
So I guess to dovetail on that, I guess to John's point about what is optimal for our students, and it came up in the conversation last time, I guess to me, it's a question of more flexible versus more restrictive scheduling for our students, and I guess it seems like with especially the new courses that you're adding and all of the options, I mean, there's some kids who want to do computers and some kids who want to do engineering. I mean, they're all over the map. It's the beauty of our student body and the beauty of Irvington High School. And I guess to me the concern is with the two of them taking in concert, the English and the health, you're really looking at limiting some of the kids and kind of forcing them into a hole to be, maybe that's not their strengths or maybe that's not where they want to be. So, I mean, to me, that's a big issue when I look at this, is the totality of the two classes together is, are we really limiting the potential of our students when they, as they move up to the high school and as they go on to college? And I think that's the point I would like to consider. The other thing is, John said this before also, but in adding the class, I guess two things. When we talked about adding the class last year, I hear what you're saying. It makes sense. It's hard to judge something in a year or two, but we never had that discussion last year, and I'm actually going to go back and watch the tapes, but my recollection was that we actually talked about getting feedback mid-year and getting feedback end of year, and that if it wasn't working, then we would have the option of changing it or doing away with it. And it was never presented to the board as, okay, if we commit to doing this, then we're going to have to stick with it a few years. Makes sense, but I'm saying as a board member, I feel like that would have been an important piece of information as we were deciding, and as John pointed out, he had these concerns initially, and together with that piece of information, I don't know what would have happened, but I hopefully moving forward, these kinds of things will be discussed up front. Makes sense, but...
So can I clarify, though? I guess, and on this document, some of the student feedback is on the document that Dr. Harrison shared with you. And I didn't say a year or two, I said after 8 months. So I do think that we should be evaluating this, and I do think that we should have an end-of-year approach to evaluating it. One of the examples that I shared was this relationship between our science, social studies, and English departments as some piece of evidence of the progress of this program. So I guess I just want to be clear. It's not that we don't want to provide any feedback at the end of this year.
Right.
But that when the conversation started, we were talking about 8 months in, and I think we need to evaluate it at the end of this year, and I think we need to evaluate it in the middle of next and the end of the following year. I don't think any of us feels that we shouldn't be evaluating the program. I think what we're acknowledging is the complexities of evaluating or assessing a writing program is more complex. You can't give a multiple choice question test and say, okay, all the students did this, or some students did this, 50% did that. So with writing, it definitely is more complex. We built this writing course on the premise that our feedback from kids is that our kids don't have enough writing, and that the writing isn't strong enough, and when they leave, and that when our kids come back, the feedback from them when they come back is the reading and writing could be stronger. We could be preparing them more. So when we presented the writing course, it was with this idea of creating a foundation of writing that would support our students for the next 4 years. It was never presented as remedial. It was presented as trying to meet kids where they are. And whether you feel we're there or not, I'm going to try not to separate out maybe some feelings about the success of the course versus what the premise of the course is. So I guess I just want to go back to the premise of the course was that our goal is to build a course, create a course that does meet our students' needs. And I don't know that every 9th grader is going to be like, yay, love to do that for, half-year writing course. But I think what our commitment was that we want to make sure our students have strength as writers in both English, but also in social studies and science and the content areas. So that still remains the premise of the course. And Jen DeLisi Hall, as you know, has done an amazing job of working with the chairs, the science chair, the social studies chair, so that our students are starting to use their writing in their content area as one unit of study in the writing course. Again, that was a launch this year. Is it exactly where we would like it to be? No, but it was a launch. So I do feel confident that we have given you some feedback when we say, what is the progress of this course? I do feel that we were clear that that's what we were setting out to do. And those are the steps that we have taken. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, but I mean, you bring up the premise of the course, and I think that's a really good question, because I guess to me the question becomes, is this something that you view as long-term, like we need this to augment what we have, or did we view this as we haven't done as good as we'd like to do in writing as the kids are coming up, and we're going to put this in now to address that need, but hopefully in the long term we're going to augment our writing through the grades, so coming up we're getting stronger writers. So I don't know, actually, now that you're saying that, I'm thinking, is the premise it's a long-term course that's here to stay because we need this, or is the premise that we're going to address the need grade by grade so that hopefully we're going to age this course out at some point?
So I would say 2 things. Dave, do you want to answer?
I think when we spoke about it last year, we talked about transitioning to high school and certainly wanting to start our 9th graders with a foundation of writing at the secondary level, and what would carry them through 4 years of high school, in a similar format that we see a lot of colleges have a freshman writing class. So I didn't see it as a way to compensate for any deficiency that they come into high school with. I think I see it as a way to advance the skills that they already bring to the high school process.
And I guess the other question is, you talk about, all the feedback or information. Do we have professional development time and money set aside this summer to work on improving the course for the fall?
So at this point, we have the teachers will be working to refine their units, and we are working to identify a possible writing path, is what I'm going to call it. So I'll give you a for instance. So in Ardsley, for many years, they have worked with the BARD Writing Project. So Jen DeLisi Hall and I, with the administrators, have talked about that would be a good next step for us to identify a writing project to align ourselves with. BARD has a very, very strong program, and I know Jen DeLisi was looking into that as a starting point, and then was going to come. BARD. And she was going to loop back with us to give us some feedback on that. So we're researching that, but yes, Robin, I think we see that as when we look at some of our neighboring districts, one of the strengths has been committing to something and really continuing to build it with that kind of support. So yes.
Maria, did you have a question?
I did. First off, the writing class, they do not receive a grade that shows up on the transcript for it, do they?
It's a half-credit class, so yes, it would
Oh,
show up
they
on the
do.
transcript.
So it's separate from the writing, from their one
It's a separate class,
English class?
correct.
Okay. Has there ever been a consideration, has it come up in conversation, this was actually posed to me by several people, our Latin program, it's a great program, both of my girls have been through it, and you see the benefit that Latin has on a student's writing. Has there ever been consideration that if a student takes Latin freshman year, that they could opt out of the writing class?
It's not something that we looked at as a consideration. I see them, while there may be overlapping skills, I don't see them as certainly directly relating to the same concept. I think Latin is a very specific course of study that may have positive influence over writing and language acquisition and a number of other important factors, but certainly our writing program is a very specific and directed process writing course, and I'm not so sure that they, in fact, I don't feel that they target the same things.
Is it possible for us to get it, you mentioned that it's a very specific program and it's targeted. I mean, we've only heard really the overview of this writing program. Could we see something more specific as to what the curriculum is, what they're doing for the half-year class? I think it would help give me a better picture of what they're doing in ninth grade.
Sorry, is it a half year or is it half?
Well, it's a half credit. It's a full year, but every other day.
Sorry, it's a half credit. That's what I meant.
But your question's a good question.
Yes.
I actually have a question. So, John posited the idea of using a survey to get some immediate feedback from parents and students. What is the sort of performance metric that you would use to evaluate the writing class irrespective of time? So if 3 years from now, and maybe we don't want to wait 3 years, but what is the outcome that we are looking for as a board and administration?
You want to answer? You want me to answer?
You can start if you
I'll
want.
start. I think that there's a couple of pieces that we're looking for, and I think that relationship between the teachers across departments is a huge piece for us. So being able to benchmark our writing, so if we were to look at our writing and look at the different levels, usually when we talk about benchmarking writing, we talk about a high, a medium, and a low. So it's different students who are working at different levels. And our goal is always to increase those levels. And so by benchmarking our writing, what we're looking to do is we're looking to establish our norm, and we're looking to see, so how do we know when our writing has increased, when it's deeper, it's more developed. And I think one measure of success would be when in our content area teachers and the kind of writing that I think parents see and students see that they're able to do as a result of the writing course. I think the other metric, feedback is always helpful, but feedback is formative. So it would definitely inform us how our students feel. I also think, though, that in a first year, it's challenging to take student feedback. Once a course or something becomes a norm in a district, in any district, it just becomes part of the practice, and students begin to expect, oh, when I get to ninth grade, I take my freshman writing course. I don't like it, I do like it, but that's part of the norm, like Dave describes a freshman writing course in college. So some of what our feedback right now is the push and pull of implementing something new. So the other reason that I look at a 2-year or even a 3-year mark is to see, are students finding it valuable? Do students see that there's a benefit? Because if that's the goal, we want our students to feel that there is a benefit to giving that every other day experience, that their writing is better, that they feel they're getting the support from those English teachers so that they are more successful. That's our goal. So that 3-year mark is also, we do want to hear students say that. So when you look at some of the feedback that we shared in this document with you, you can see there are students who, I think somebody even wrote, I don't really want to be taking this freshman writing course, but I understand that it's helping me to be a better writer. I guess the question comes down to, and I think this is true with the health as well, there are certain times where we make decisions as the educators in this program, as the parents, the adults, and of what we think should be. And I think those are always challenging. So I guess what I would say, Phil, that was a long answer to, I think that the metric will be multi-leveled. So one is that ultimately we want to see better writing. Two, we want to hear that kids value it, that there's a benefit to it. And I think for me, those are the two big markers. How we get there along the way is challenging.
So if I kind of parse what you said, it sounds to me like, based on what you said tonight, the primary metric is a qualitative metric, and that it's pretty hard to get to a quantitative metric. So understanding that, it does sound like it would be wise for us to begin that qualitative effort immediately, because qualitative analysis in terms of feedback and comments is an ongoing process.
Exactly.
Right. So if you start now and let's say the majority of comments are, I get what you're trying to do, but boy, that certainly wasn't satisfying. And then next year, or at some point next year, if that flips, where this was a great course, whatever. But at least you start with a
So baseline data. We do need baseline data from this year. I don't think anybody would argue that. I think we just also understand that from one year to the next, there's variations in cohorts, there's variations in ability. There's a lot of variables in measuring this.
Well, it's not like you're going to be comparing a 4 to a 3. You're going to be using
Exactly.
the feedback.
So,
And as long as you're getting enough feedback to make it meaningful.
That's right.
Because if you only get 15 comments, it may not be indicative of people as a whole.
right.
One other piece to that to add is also the qualitative feedback that we can get from the content teachers in other subject areas. So as we've talked about, the ability for a student to bring in a piece of writing from social studies or science into their writing course and to go through a feedback cycle and a feedback loop to improve upon that writing, you then can talk to the content teachers in that social studies class and that science class to get a sense of how that writing is developed as well.
Dave, can you just clarify, the feedback you're talking about, that occurs during the class time?
In the writing class, sure. Deb?
The answer is yes.
Well, I'm sorry, can you repeat your question? Because I'm listening that you would like an example of the type of feedback that
No,
students
I
receive.
want to understand the feedback process you're talking about, where students bring in writing from science, or what was the other example?
Science and social studies,
Social studies, which is history primarily.
yes. So I could actually share a specific example today.
But I was asking a somewhat different, well, I'd like the example, but
Sure.
my question is, when does that occur? During the writing class time?
So I spent
How
some
does it
time,
occur also?
in my last supervision cycle, I went into every writing course and every English 9 course, specifically to glean my own data around the writing. I actually spent time today in an upper-level 9th grade writing course where students actually had work in a portfolio from their 9th grade global studies teacher. Their global studies teacher had read their work, had put comments, annotated. Some students were working pencil paper, some students were actually working through a Google Doc. What I witnessed today were students working with their own paper, deciphering through the feedback that they received from their global studies teacher, while their English teacher held one-on-one conferences at the table in the center of the room. I sat at that table and I listened to the dialogue between the teacher and the student. Using direct feedback from the social studies teacher, this English teacher was able to glean and unpack and ask further questions. So I'll give you an example. This young man was a very strong writer. No one would doubt that he is able to communicate in written form. What was surfaced through the comments from his global studies teacher was that he lacked some focus, let's say per se, through a thesis statement. I'm going to use that as one example. What the English teacher was able to do one-on-one with the student was to read the work together, side by side. And the glory of a conference is that the teacher can get into the mind of the student. The student was able to articulate with his words exactly what he was wanting to say. The teacher gave explicit and targeted instruction on the difference between an example that supports writing and a thesis statement. I listened to the student process this. The student then went back to the computer and revised in real time. I also watched another student, if I could, who had their Google Doc open to comments that were by peer and by teacher. So the student had a pen and paper handed in piece of work to their global studies teacher. It was filled with lots of comments written in red or purple ink from the social studies teacher. And this was a document that they had opened on Google. comments were included on the sides. So I walked over to the student, I said, help me understand what these comments are. These were comments from their English teacher directly, pointing to specific parts of the text, as well as comments from their peers. These students were able to, yes, these students were able to work in groups to...
This is in what class?
This was in the writing course.
They're working in groups?
So they're working in pairs, sometimes they're working independently, sometimes they're conferencing one-on-one. My point is that during this Google experience, they were able to get real-time feedback into the work in progress, and were able to make revisions within a 42-minute period. I watched work grow in sophistication in both syntax, conventions, and analysis. So it was targeted to the needs of each student. And there's work to do, there always is. But I just wanted to give an example of how the work is actually real-time, authentic pieces of writing that are currently going on in the Global 9 course, which is thematic and DBQ writing, where the social studies teacher and the English teacher are working in unison, in real time, to give the student feedback to make improvements on their work.
Thank you.
I was asking after a different question, I guess, is what, so that's the one-on-one, and the other, how many other students are in the class? It's a simple question.
So it's about 12, between 10 and 12 students per writing course.
On their own during that period?
Well, I wouldn't say they're on their own, because what they're working through is a feedback loop. So the conferencing, the kids cycle in and out of conferencing. I watch students come up to the teacher, ask specific questions while she was conferencing, and then when the teacher had completed 2 one-on-one conferencing, she actually walked around student to student. I will share another example.
Well, fine if you want, I don't.
At the end of each course, the teacher asks 3 questions. What did you work on today? How did you improve your writing? And what questions do you have?
Can you repeat that?
What did you work on today? Where did you make improvements? Any questions that you have? And she actually went back with these index cards to individual students to address their questions from the class that had been 2 days before in the work that they're currently working on. So there's multiple ways in which teachers give feedback to students on their writing in real time. And it's also building students' metacognition, the reflective feedback loop for students to name the work that they've done in that 42 minutes and to name it for themselves as a skill and to ask questions. I'm struggling with analysis. I'm not really sure how to move my work forward. And for a teacher to be able to go back to a student and address that specifically can have profound results on the sophistication of writing. And that's every other day throughout the year.
Thank you. It's helpful to have
Yeah, can I ask a logistical question? So theoretically, if you have an English class and there's 24 students in it, the class is broken up in half, so 12 students are in the A days and the other 12 are in the B days. So the writing class is significantly smaller.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think you have the same teacher for writing.
It's an every other day class, so you,
Oh, right.
And the class is 42 minutes long?
yeah.
Okay, I think we can open up the floor to questions from the community and comments. It's normally not on our agenda, but I think because this is a subject that people care about, we want to hear about it in real time, as Deb said. I see Ms. Lenz at the microphone.
I'm shorter than you, sorry. My question is why does it have to be qualitative, and why does it have? Why can it not be quantitative? We just heard that if you we've had our administrators watch it grow, and if you could actually see it grow, why can't we quantify it? What was our goals? What were we seeking to gain when we implemented this program? Did we not have actual goals? Writing, there are tests to evaluate writing. It's not, did you write about flowers today? There is actual tests to show what knowledge is gained. Prepositions, commas, there are actual tests. So why can we not quantify it with actual data? My next concern is building a norm. The problem with that, and we've experienced it throughout history, and given time to let a program go, we've experienced this with Trailblazers. And unfortunately, we have kids that are collateral damage. So my concern is kids that are going through this program, how are we evaluating their gains? Actual gains, not did you enjoy the class? To me, I would rather see my kid not enjoy the class but know how to write. So building a norm, and when I hear anything that reflects collateral damage is a big red flag for me. I don't want my kids to have to go through this and miss other opportunities when we don't know what kind of program we're going to put in place.
Can I just, you've asked, I think, 3 questions.
Okay,
So I want to make sure that we're getting the questions so we can answer them.
okay.
Do you want to just hold up and
Yeah.
let them answer those? Tell them? Is that
Yep.
okay? I think what were the goals, right?
Right. So the goals are exactly what we talked about. The goal is based on developing kids' thinking as writers. It's not only that we want them to be good writers, we want prepositions and syntax, we want all of that to be done correctly, and I guess we could measure writing that way. I think what we were talking about is the piece that Deb just referred to, is students' ability to take their writing, take feedback, develop their writing more deeply, do the analysis piece so that they can draw conclusions, and that they can write in a thoughtful, cohesive, cogent way within English, but also in the content areas. So I guess I know that there are writing tests, but I think what we've seen over the years, for instance, is the state assessments. New York State assessments, I think, are a good example of that, where a student is given a writing prompt, and then even the way it's scored, it's always a little subjective writing. It really could never be an objective test, or we don't have the capacity to score something on an objective level of a writing test. So it's scored by teachers. And so what we can do, when I say norm, because I wouldn't want you to think that, what we're saying is identifying or naming what the different levels of writing should look like, using rubrics to measure that so that all of our teachers are looking at the writing through a similar lens.
Could we see the rubrics?
Right, well, yes, so that's what, somebody asked what the work looks like, sure.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming, because it's my understanding that the writing, even the contemplation of putting this program in place was because of our kids not having well-developed writing skills.
No, and so I think Dave answered that this wasn't a deficit model. We didn't think that we weren't doing well. Again, we have very many neighboring districts and other districts in Westchester, support kids with writing courses. This isn't a completely novel idea. It wasn't a deficit model at all. I think we wanted to strengthen our students' ability to write in both English as well as in the content areas, to give them more confidence. And again, and I think Deb talked about it quite succinctly, which is that thinking piece. So the research shows that how do we get better at what we're doing, right? Feedback. We see that whether you're a coach on the field or whether you're a teacher in the classroom. Feedback is what helps our students to become stronger. And so the whole premise of this was to build a course that doesn't have too many kids in it. Teachers can give that kind of feedback with the expectation of an increase in students' ability to write, confidence in writing, and quality of writing.
Well, I guess the last is my biggest concern is the quality. I want my kids to enjoy writing, but I care less about them enjoying it as I do them writing it correctly and knowing how to write. I didn't enjoy writing some of my history papers, but I still knew how to write it correctly.
Bill, may I just suggest, but can we get another question? Then you can always do a follow-up, right? Because we want to get everybody's questions in.
Okay. First of all, the more writing, the merrier. I think you can't get enough writing.
Can you please state your name and?
Victoria Weissel, Tori Weissel. I have a son who's graduating this year, yay. I have another son with me right now who's in 7th grade, yay. However, I wanted to talk about, it's precisely feedback from students that is most important. Dr. Harrison and Mr. Cohen, I had written you a letter saying that you need to look at top-down assessment as well as bottom-up in the grades. What I think is sorely lacking is the fact that expository writing, when you're talking about expository writing and informational, explanatory, persuasive argument, we see bits and smatterings of that. It should have been begun in middle school, really strongly in middle school. I think that it's wonderful to have a freshman writing program, just as in college you have a freshman writing program, but the fact that expository writing has not been introduced firmly for the kids to enter freshmen is a real problem. And you can look at the top-down piece, like when I talk to my son, and this is no insult towards English classes, he got no feedback. He got grades, but he got nothing on his writing. He was told that he had a terrific paper, but nobody told him why. They didn't tell him what worked and how the mechanics worked. And it is about metacognition, and you can only get that through expository instruction. I particularly like Judith Hochman's writing program from Windward, because it is broken down into such definite pieces that work for middle school on up, and you can build on it. But I know if you talk to the kids starting in senior year and talk about what they got, if you're talking to kids and asking for their assessments in freshmen, they don't know what they don't know. So you might be getting positive feedback from that. Talk to the kids at the top of the ladder and ask them what they didn't get. And again, I'm not saying this is a criticism, but I'm saying to truly analyze what's going on, for expository writing, you have to do that. There's a different way of writing for every content area, and I know that the teachers that my 12th grader has had, social studies, science, they all have a different way. So I applaud if you're bringing in the strands from the other classes and having somebody really look at them. That's terrific. But I'm concerned that this is more of a Band-Aid than a systemic or a school-wide thing that starts in middle school. It's not okay to suddenly start it in freshmen. We need to be building it up in middle school so that as they're approaching, you might be able to go into greater enrichment in a freshman writing program if they had that base from the beginning. And I also wanted to say that in terms of the 9th grade option to skip lunch, how is that health helping? You know, you want your kids to not be burned out in 9th grade. And they ought to be able to take what they want to take. And so to say that you strongly suggest, I think it gives them, I'm hoping it's the same freedom that they've always had to be able to rotate things around. Because I know that for my own child, the first thing that's going to go is music. He's going to go for these different things, and something's going to give. Because you can't ask a kid to not have lunch. And there have been so many articles written about schools around the area where the kids are so pressurized. So really, when you're talking about health and using health as a classroom or a class to promote good habits, how are you promoting a good habit by having them skip a lunchtime with a jam-packed schedule and 10 periods? That doesn't make sense. So I like the way that you're thinking, but I think you have to look from the top down to middle school. We look from the bottom up in elementary. We've built strong programs. Maybe we've had our glitches, but the strength is there. It's easier because you can dictate to elementary school. You can't dictate to high school because they're already working on being independent. So that's an intrinsic problem from the get-go. But you really have to start in 6th through 8th.
Tori, may I interrupt just because you've got a long line here? Yeah, they all materialized while you were up there.
All right,
so.
but I just really wanted to put out there, don't sacrifice our children's health for the sake of health. Class, and also start building your writing program from 6th grade on.
Thank you.
Maybe we could integrate health and lunch so you could learn healthy eating habits while you're actually doing it.
Hi, Stephanie Plout. I have 2 seniors and I have a freshman. So we're experiencing the writing program right now. And I think Deb Marinello painted a wonderful picture, but that's not our experience. And as a parent, I'm quite upset, in fact, that my son's been part of this experiment this year because he's not really taking away anything from it. And I feel that it's unfair to bring in a program that isn't fully baked and put it into a student's life. So her program sounded wonderful. That's not what he's experienced so far. You know, we talked about, well, colleges have freshman writing courses. Yes, they do, but they're content-based. People are all reading a text, and they're writing from that text together. That isn't what's happening here. And writing, when this community said we wanted better writers, it's because we wanted better writers when they reach college who can write research papers in history, social sciences, can write English papers, can write resumes, can write correspondences. That's the kind of writing we want, and that's not what I've seen this year. And as long as this class is not content-based, I don't know how we're going to get there. And that really is what this community wanted. Better writers going to college who can handle college-level work. And this class right now isn't doing it. So you've got to evaluate it, because I think the experience varies from teacher to teacher. But at the end of the day, if it's not content-based, I don't think we're going to get where we wanted. The other part of it, just to kind of piggyback on Tori, is when those double period ELAs went in middle school, I'd hoped that that was the time when we were going to finally bring back some grammar and vocabulary, because I do not understand how you can be a writer without the tools for writing. Our kids are not taught grammar, they're not taught vocabulary. I don't know what you can write if you don't have the words and you don't have the grammar to write it. That's it.
Thank you.
Can I ask one informational question? When you say content-based, what do you mean?
I mean that you have a class in which you're writing based on a shared text. You have a shared activity, so that you're all trying to write from a single perspective.
Okay.
When you're writing in freshman English in college, you've read a single text.
Oh, yeah.
You know, your papers are based on that text.
Paradise Lost.
Thank you.
Great.
Hi, my name's Alona Marsh. I have a senior, a junior, and an 8th grader. I've been listening to everyone talk for the past 2 meetings about the writing course and health and all the things, and I think that it's so nice and fuzzy to stand up here and talk about what we want in a writing class and we want our kids to do, and that we can't evaluate it yet because it's already there. But a couple of things strike me in that conversation, and the first is that we can't discuss the writing class in the vacuum of the choices it's taking away from our kids. My junior and senior have really had amazing opportunities to make choices and go through, 4 years of architecture, 4 years of Latin, as many years of music as they wanted to. And pushing this down takes that choice away. And it might be a decision that we say that is worthwhile, but I think it's a conversation that needs to happen, not in light of, is this a good course? Is writing something we want for our kids? Of course it is. It's a wonderful thing. But in light of the choices that it takes away from them. And that's why I don't think you can wait to evaluate the program. I think you can't wait because many of us, maybe people in this room knew, but many of us, when we heard there was going to be a writing, really didn't realize that it was going to take so many choices away from our kids. And the truth is that it is. You can say like it's optional or there's lunch or whatever, but bottom line, when I went to 8th grade night, which was wonderful, by the way, so much information we got that we never got before, AP Art is a 4-year course. So if you want to go to college and be an artist, you need to do a portfolio, and you need to take AP Art to do that. If we're interested in getting a STEM program in our school, which we're doing a wonderful job at, my daughter's going to be one of the first kids who can do the 4-year architecture engineering program. What an opportunity to have a daughter who's graduating and saying, I want to be an engineer. I don't think that could have happened without that program. So we have all these we're trying to get these 4-year programs in that are such great opportunities for our kids, and yet they can't do it now. They can't do it if they want to take Latin. And it's sad to say, but the number one reason the kids just take Latin is not sad, I'm sorry. We have powerful, wonderful teachers. But the number 2 reason that all our kids take Latin is to learn English. And there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with that in a school where we're already double blocking English in 6th grade every day, I believe, right? And then we're double blocking English every other day in 7th and 8th grade. And so that brings me to my final point, which is I don't think it's fair to look at the writing program in a vacuum of, you said earlier, Raina, that we added the writing program because we had feedback from kids going to college and secondary education that they didn't have what they needed. But that feedback was from the kids who didn't have the double blocking. I think this 9th grade is actually the first grade that actually had the double blocking, or the 2nd grade. Serena certainly didn't have it in 11th grade.
10th graders.
10th grade. 9th grade. No, the 9th grade, the current grade taking writing is the first grade that had...
10th grade.
10th grade? Okay, so it's the second grade. So you haven't really had feedback coming through. We haven't evaluated that program, is my point. That I can tell you that my feeling anecdotally, having an 8th grader and an 11th and 10th grader, is that, first of all, my 8th grader came through a very different Main Street school that had more equality in teaching and classrooms and what each class learned at Main Street School. So I think he came out of Main Street School, to your credit, with a much stronger academic background. And again, he's going through this double block. He's written 10 times more than my children ever did. And I'm not saying it's a perfect picture, but I'm saying that you kind of can't evaluate, you know, and say we need this without seeing what they're doing there at the middle school. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura.
Hi, my name is Sydney, and I'm an 8th grader here. And next year I'm going to have to experience this writing class. And while you guys have as long as you need to evaluate this class, and maybe you think you need 3 or 4 years, freshman year is 25% of my high school experience, and that means that I have to spend my time taking this class that may or may not benefit me. And I have a lot of friends in the 9th grade who I've spoken to about this class, and they've all said to me that they don't not find it beneficial, but they don't find it improving the areas they need help in. And we do have a double block in middle school, and we use the second block right now to complete work that we don't think we can get done at home. It's a work period where we conference with our teachers if we need to, but that's what needs to be changed, not what's going on in high school. And in addition to that, with the health class and taking away an elective period, if we take an art and we choose to take Latin, and we take a music, then we don't have a lunch, and we do need lunch, as was brought up before. Otherwise, we're going to be exhausted and physically drained. And if you do all 3 of those things, and you take a sport after school, and you do the school play, and I know I'm planning on doing the school play and doing a sport and taking as many electives as I possibly can, then I'm working in the building from 7:50 to 9 o'clock at night, and that's not how I want to spend my first year of high school. I want to have as many choices as I possibly can.
Thank you, Sydney.
Thank you.
Hi, David Rubin. I wasn't really going to speak, but I just want to make one very quick comment. I have a 12th grader and a 3rd grader. My 12th grader never took Latin. We tried to get him to do it. He refused. I think having 4-year Latin is wonderful, a great thing, and I think everything should be done to make that as available as possible to anybody that wants to do it. And if this cuts us out, it's a mistake.
Thank you. You get points for brevity.
Hi, my name is Ryan Havdallah. I am a graduating senior this year at the high school. And I've got a lot to say. I'm going to try not to...
You're going to take up David's time.
Okay, that works for me, because I've got plenty. But, so I wanted to start with saying that coming into high school, I really wasn't a strong writer. English wasn't really inside that, like, an area that I was comfortable with. And coming into high school, I also really, with my freshman schedule, I was like, I go into my guidance meeting. I've got my schedule. Hey, I want to have a free period, and I'll take 1 elective. And with the advisory assistance of my family and my guidance counselor, I was told to take Latin. And I was kind of pushed into this. I didn't really see that much value in it, and it turned out to be probably the best decision I've ever made in my entire life. The value that that's had on me as a person over the past 4 years, it's really made my high school experience everything. And currently, if I was coming into the high school, I don't feel that I would be a part of the Latin program, because I was a person who really needed help with writing. I wasn't confident in my abilities. I didn't really like English, and I know I wouldn't have wanted to add on to my schedule more work. And I was kind of, I'm going to be pretty honest with myself about how over the 4 years, my time's been very busy. I've been very active in sports, clubs around the school, and I tried to make my school day as minimally stressful as possible while still taking just about all honors classes and doing well. I finished in near the top of my class, top 15% or so. But I really was very busy. I was very active. And I don't think that with this current thing I would be in the same position as I am today, because we've talked about lunch and how people have to skip lunch to take certain electives. Multiple years have happened where I've actually dropped classes as a result of my not being able to have lunch. Some years it's because, I wanted to take SUPA one year, and I couldn't move that because it was only running 2 periods, and the other period was my French class, and in French honors, there was only 1 period of that. So I couldn't move anything. I ended up having to eat during a class, or I ended up changing from Chem honors to Chem regular one year. I ended up switching my schedule around from Latin AP to Latin honors, and then back to AP during the year, which I really do think was was a great decision for me. And having taken AP Latin and having gone through 4 years, in the 4 years in my Latin experience, I've gotten 4 gold medals on the National Latin exam. I just finished my AP. I've really worked and done my best in Latin, and it's been probably my favorite class. I don't always mesh with teachers, and really to say how well and how strongly the 2 of them have influenced me, Mr. Silva and Ms. Sella, they're really, really great, and they've gotten me through my school day so many times. And continuing about how Latin's helped me. Coming into the high school in terms of basically government kind of, I don't know how to say, standardized testing, there it is. Standardized English testing, that was never a strong suit of mine. And when I came into junior year about to take the ACT, I took my first practice ACT English section and I got a 35 out of 36. And I had never reviewed it before, and after it I'm like, that's all we've done in Latin. It was easy because this is what we've been doing in Latin for 3 years actually at that time. So basically, I think that Latin's contributions, while we've talked about how it doesn't directly relate to with writing, I would say that it's directly changed me in English and with writing, because my writing has drastically improved because through Latin I've gained a better understanding of English grammar. And what we've said, a previous speaker had talked about, they're not learning vocabulary, they're not learning grammar. In my Latin class, what we did for almost 3 years was vocabulary and grammar. That's all we did, and that's really given me the tools to be a serious writer. Another thing that was mentioned earlier was about the double blocks of English, and I think that having an extra period of a class, it's actually the same layout currently as we have in science classes with labs. And coming into high school, I was really big on science. I was like into science and math, and then I started having science with a lab period, and I'm not the kind of student that focuses well over long periods of time. So if I'm going from English and then I have to stay there for another period and sit still, I'll be completely restless and I can't really focus. That's just something that's about me as a student. I'm not a typical student that you'll find in most classrooms. I don't really learn the same way or work the same way. But I think that this would really have had a negative effect on my English experience, because I've really come to value my English class, and over the past 2 years I've taken SUPA, SUPA Public Speaking last year and SUPA English this year. And those writing courses and the amount of writing that I've done over the past 2 years would have been impossible had I not had the background that I gained from Latin. So finally, I also wanted to talk about how I have no issues with the writing program. I think it was really something that would have helped me as a freshman, but I think that had I taken it, it really would have hindered the rest of my experience, because I didn't take the writing class. I can't say that it's good or bad. I haven't heard rave reviews on it from freshman friends, but I haven't heard a lot of hatred for it. But I'm gonna say that when I was in middle school, I didn't like English because I had to sit through it for 2 periods, and that was really not something that I was totally capable of, especially in 6th grade when we had the double. And in terms of our English feedback and the feedback that we've given, I was just recalling earlier an English paper that I wrote in 10th grade, where what was written on it was 82, you disagreed with the critical lens. That was all it said, and that was my grade. And I was sitting there flabbergasted that I simply got a lower grade because I didn't say what she was looking for. I tried to go for something different and tried to be different. And I feel like if we keep going with this kind of writing seminar kind of thing, it's going to merge everyone's writing into one really just a mold, and trying to fit the mold and trying to break from the mold is actually what's made me successful over the 4 years, was breaking the mold and trying to do different things and being a different kind of learner. And I just wanted to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to express my opinions here, but because I'm not the kind of person to normally be motivated to do even my homework. Sometimes I'll be so busy. I just came from soccer practice. Just the fact that I'm here, I think, is enough to say that I really feel passionately about this, and I think that it's really something that is extremely important to ensure that certain programs like Latin and other electives, like I know I have friends who have gone through the engineering program, and that's a great program, and the art program is a great program, and I just know that there are a lot of people that would be affected, and that I feel like I would be affected by this program in an extremely negative way. So I just want to make sure that everyone's fully aware of exactly what could occur, and that my high school experience would have been much worse.
Thank you. Zoe?
Hi, I'm Zoe Mermelstein. So I'm actually somebody who happens to love English. I love language. I'm taking AP Literature next year, and I'm taking Greek and Latin next year. So I feel like it's true, we actually do have a deficit in English. I think that fifth grade, I had great experience at Main Street, but in middle school, and this is coming from someone who loves English, I hated English class. I felt like it was completely based upon the rubric, and the second period was really a time when people just, dozed off. It wasn't really a time that we used. And I think that we never learned grammar, and I think the biggest deficit actually is that not that people come to ninth grade not knowing how to express themselves per se. They have ideas. They don't know the English language. They don't know grammar. I mean, I've got a 6th grade girl that I tutor right now, and if I am trying to write an English essay with her and trying to help her with her homework, she can tell me exactly what she wants to say about her essay, and she can very coherently. But if she tries to put it into a spoken word, she has no idea what to do, because her grammar is just, it's all over the map. She doesn't know how to communicate in the written word because no one ever taught her that. And I think that's a huge deficit, and I think it's not an issue that's in high school. I think it's an issue that's in the middle school. And I think that while we do need to strengthen our English program, it's something that needs to happen. It was misguided. It's not something that needs to happen in the high school. It's something that needs to happen in the middle school. And furthermore, what did help me in high school was Latin. And honestly, I learned more about grammar from Latin than I have since kindergarten. And now I am embarking upon I just finished my 2nd year of Latin, and I'm going into Latin 4-H next year. And it's helped me tremendously, and I know that when I write my college essays, I'm going to be able to speak coherently, not because of an English class, because of Latin. Furthermore, I think that while an English program can be incredibly beneficial, we weren't really using our 42 minutes to begin with in 9th grade when I was in 9th grade English. We wrote maybe 5 essays. That's not what we should be doing. In 10th grade, I've written at least 3 or 4 times that, and I don't feel that I've been so incredibly overworked. I think that they could be using their 42 minutes to have those comments that Ms. Marinello talked about, or the one-on-one time. I don't think they need an extra period. And it does give less options for freshmen. Like you said, there are fewer electives, and the electives that are offered are often full-year electives. So if you add in a half-year class, you're really limiting. I took art and Latin, and those were both full-year classes freshman year. And this year, I took health, which works because I was taking a class that wasn't available in freshman year, science research, which is a half-year class, so it fit. And that's really the gist of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wonder where we'd be if we didn't have smartphones and other devices to record all of our notes to see how well thought out everybody is.
We use this thing called paper. It was weird.
Okay, I'm Ellen Weissman. I'm old-fashioned, and I wrote it on paper. I have a sophomore here at the high school and a graduating senior from another school. And I don't want to reiterate everything that everybody's already said, because I think most of the points that I was going to make have been mentioned, but just to kind of concisely say, you know, I don't think that anybody would argue that writing needs to be improved and that that's been a relative weakness in our school district. But I do think that the remedy, which is to increase the quantity, is not the remedy that everybody was looking for. There was a lot of not so great quality in the English program, and I don't see why we can't improve the quality within a normal 42-minute period to provide the kinds of writing experiences, reading experiences, grammar experiences, and everything else that needs to be taught in English. And I think we've heard from some of the students, I've certainly heard from my own daughter, that the extra period, you know, people in middle school just laid around on sofas, and, you know, they're not getting a lot out of that extra time. And that extra time, again, doesn't happen in a vacuum. The trade-off is that they aren't then able to take advantage of some of the incredibly positive, successful opportunities that exist, from Latin to the engineering program, to the art program, to the music program. And I just think it's a terrible shame to increase quantity before you try to increase quality within the time that you have. Another point I want to make is about surveys and about evaluation. If the part of the evaluation is, does writing improve? Well, I should sure as heck hope writing improves from 9th grade to 10th grade. The question is, how would it have improved in a high-quality single-period course? That's the comparison to make, not does it improve just comparing to nothing or comparing to what they were when they came in. So I'd like to point out that without a comparison of a single high-quality single-period course, that doesn't really convince me of very much. And the other point I'd like to make about surveys is that they absolutely have to be anonymous, and they absolutely have to allow people to express themselves freely. Regardless of conversations I've had with various administrators here, both students and parents are very, very concerned about saying anything negative that they feel could somehow, in some indirect way, come back to hurt their child, either in a specific class or more generally in terms of how they're treated, or exceptions that perhaps are or aren't made. And I know that specific administrators disagree with me vehemently about this, but I have never spoken to a parent who doesn't have that as a concern. And so I think anonymity is really important. I also think that the structure of how surveys is done is really important. Unintended bias affects surveys, and it's true. I'm in medicine. It's true in medicine. If you don't ask the right questions, you don't get the right answers. Or if you ask questions a certain way, you get one answer. If you ask them a different way, you get a different answer. And going all the way back to Trailblazers, you know, you ask the questions a certain way, you get the answers that maybe unintentionally you're looking for. But you also have to have a potential for people to freely say what they want. My son was surveyed back as a little kid in Trailblazers. At the end of it, they didn't ask any questions that got to his issues and his concerns about it. At the end, they asked him, do you have any questions? He said, no, I don't have any questions. But they never asked him, what do you think? So I think that has been a problem in surveys, is that you get the answers that you're asking for, and it's got to be done independently and anonymously.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jill Rembar, and I'd just like to start with a question to Mr. Cohen about the Latin enrollment, because when we spoke on the phone about 3 weeks ago, he said you were 60 or 65% done with figuring out how many people were going to be enrolled in Latin for next year. And so I see it's still not done, and I'm just wondering when that will happen, and it's really a shame that that enrollment couldn't be announced at tonight's board meeting since people are so curious. What's the holdup?
So there is no holdup. As was released tonight, we currently have 76 students that requested Latin 1, and that's based on our current scheme of courses that students can enroll into. The course enrollment, we just haven't finished scheduling yet, so that's
what I meant, the holdup.
Right. So scheduling typically isn't done by this point in time in the year yet, so we're in the process of doing that. But when we spoke a few weeks ago, we only had 65% of the requests in, so that was why I wasn't able to give you that number at the time. But now we've been able to finish that, and we currently have 76 students. It's actually 77 as of today that have requested Latin.
Could you guess? Could you give us a projection about what percentage of those kids might get into their Latin?
Yes, well, if you see that the data here shows that roughly about I don't know, 95 to 98% of the students that have requested the course have been able to get in. In some years, actually, it was 90, and the enrollment isn't always based on who can fit it in. There are other decisions. Sometimes students get in but then drop out. So I would expect, similarly, 95% approximately of those 76 students to be able to get it in there.
When will you have that, do you think?
We're working on our scheduling, and our hope is to be able to schedule the school by the end of the year.
Thanks. I wanted to I wanted to say something that seems painfully obvious to me, and I hope it's not wrong. It could be wrong, but it just seems to me that the part of the problem with scheduling Latin or other electives in ninth grade, it was generated by a decision to have the ELA, I don't know, what's the writing course called in ninth grade? The ninth grade writing course? The ninth grade half credit writing course, what's the name of it? It's called the writing course, so it's like on the transcript as the writing course. Okay, so the writing course, so when the writing course was instituted, the writing course could dovetail with a science lab or a gym, and then there's a period left over every other day, or however that scheduling works. So to put health right in there just makes it a nice, tight, compact thing. Because we don't have other electives, apparently, in ninth grade that will fit in with it. It makes sense for the administration to make it really easy for every piece of scheduling to say, let's put health right in there. We could do things like come up with other electives, but then we'd have to worry later on about did the kid get their health in, and I think that Zoe spoke nicely about how not taking health in ninth grade helped her take some electives and open some opportunities for her. So I think there's some, as with everything and with people who have opinions, there's some spin. And, when we hear that it's, it opens opportunities later, we're not seeing in this document that it closes down opportunities now, which it does. Is always an example of the other thing. But so when we have this ELA, writing course, gym, science, health, that's a nice tight block, and it makes it easy for everybody. The quality of I don't want to go into that. So maybe we should come up with other electives. Maybe we should talk about having Latin as a substitute for a writing class. I think that Mr. Cohen mentioned that, and other people mentioned that colleges offer freshman writing classes. I think most colleges offer them. Some colleges offer them as remedial. Some colleges let students place out of them. And I think that my daughter's college, I only have one kid who just graduated from college last year, went through all these schools. But my daughter's college, I think, offers a freshman writing class that you can place out of, but if you place out of it, there are certain other classes that you have to take in content areas. You have to choose a class in a content area with heavy writing, but you have a wide choice. You can take microbiology, you can take genetics, you can take religion class, you can take pretty much whatever you want. So if we had that kind of writing class where people are talking about content, I mean, if we trained our history teachers, who probably might love that, if they don't do it already, you can do your writing in the history class, you can do your writing in the science. But if we did that, then or if we asked our Latin teacher, would you be willing to take on a different writing component, bet that they could squeeze that in there. So it's probably possible if we were ambitious and wanted to give our kids opportunity, as I've heard so many times tonight that we're after giving our kids opportunity. At the same time, I'm hearing where we're closing the opportunity. Let's, talk about that. So if we want to make it like college, if we want to equate it to college, let's say that we're going to give kids the choice to do that kind of thing. I think there's one more thing that I want to say, and if I had a smartphone, I'd be able to read my handwriting.
Do you want to relinquish the mic, let somebody else?
No, let me, yeah, I'm going to come back.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Robin Weiss. I'm a sophomore at Irvington High School, and I wrote a speech. I was supposed to go to the last board meeting, but I couldn't make it. So I just want to start off. Everybody's high school story is very different. I know mine's different from Zoe's, and my other friends. My goal for freshman year was definitely to become a better writer. I was never a strong writer, and my brother had raved about the Latin program, and he graduated back in 2007, and he told me that it really helped him learn how to write and learn about not only the Latin language and a different culture, but the English language itself. And I signed up for Latin, not really sure what I'd get out of it. I truly had no opinion on it.
I'm not a strong writer, as I didn't learn how to write in middle school because no one provided me with tools and feedback, even though I had to sit through double blocks in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I handed in my first essay of high school, and I was taking honors English at the time, and I got a fail. That really, I knew I needed a change from that point. I immediately went to my guidance office that day, and I asked to drop and move to general. And that, I think, was the best decision. And I got a tutor, and she really helped me. She gave me feedback. She helped me form an essay. And that was the first time I realized, like, I could develop thesis. I can develop and analyze something. So with that, tutoring Mr. Grovin and Miss Sella that year, I really developed my writing and my grammar and my sentence structure. And the essay I handed in general English, I got a 92. And I went home, I was so happy. It helped me succeed and impacted my sophomore year and last year. I really gained confidence in myself and joined a Latin community and joined a community where I felt safe and could ask any questions I felt and got all my feedback. I just want to bring up a point is, why not utilize the time that I had a 42-minute block, and that helped me learn how to write. Why have a double block when possibly the double block could be just to finish up some extra work, like Sydney mentioned. I mean, I know that sitting through double blocks all through middle school, they were very beneficial, but high school is a time where you can do what you feel and find who you really are. And I found who I was in 9th grade, and because I got to go do Latin and art and various other electives. Also, why not make that writing class optional for some people that struggle in writing, or maybe that want to take that extra class? There's some people I know that they love global. Why can't they have a double global class? You know, why just English? If anything, Latin is definitely important. If anything, we should have a mandatory Latin one, not a mandatory English. Just 1 year of Latin. Latin is really helpful. And I really care about the future of Irvington, as it is where I grew up and learned how to write and learned how to speak and read. And I want the school to keep I care about the future of Irvington, the future of the students that come out of the school, and how we represent the student body of Irvington High School.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Caleb Schwartz, and I know a lot of the points I came here to make have been said and stated pretty excellently, so I'll be pretty brief. But I just wanted to say I'm a high school senior right now, and I'm going off to college next year, and I've been on way too many college tours, and mostly towards the liberal arts schools, and I've sat through pretty much the same information session over and over again. And what the schools are saying is basically, in your freshman year, we want you to take courses that you haven't done before, or something that you think you might not be interested in, and we want you to explore, and we want you to try something new. And I'm frankly just so excited to do that, because that's kind of how I've looked at my own learning throughout my 4 years at Irvington High School. And when I came into my freshman year, I saw Latin was an option, and I figured, why not Latin? And I think I joined way too many clubs that year, and I pretty much overextended myself and tried to do as much as possible. And I just wanted to see what would stick, what I would like. And I ended up taking 4 years of Latin and 3 years of ancient Greek. And I just developed such a passion for those classes and those languages, and I was trying to think, like for a while I've been thinking, what is it about these classes that I like so much, and why did I come back year after year to take these ancient languages that nobody speaks anymore? And I thought, okay, yeah, well, they're great teachers. Ms. Sell and Mr. Silverman are wonderful people, but there was something I realized I was getting that was more than what I was getting in other classes, and I had kind of thought back to all the writing, the papers I've gotten back and assignments in maybe an English class, and I thought about how when I hand in a paper, I can get back a rubric with a couple boxes circled on it for an essay and no comments, or a paper with a research paper that's the only comment on this 9-page paper is proofread and then a grade. And I thought back to the countless number of rubrics I've been receiving since elementary school, and I realized that in Latin and Greek, I was exposed to new ideas that did not really fit into a rubric, and different nuances and I guess elements of the language that really were new ideas that I was unfamiliar to, and I felt like every time I was reading a new text, it was something that had not been kind of just like Ms. Sell and Mr. Silverman were not just reading off some rubric they were handed or like some Common Core thing or something to prepare us for a state test, because that just was the nature of the classes. And I feel like by studying the languages, I learned so much about structure of writing, how to write sentences, word etymology, word choice, nuance in writing. In ancient Greek, you can express ideas that it would take 10 words in English to express full sentences in just one word. And I just thought, wow, this is so interesting. I've never seen anything like this before. So basically, if anything, I want to say that we need to reevaluate how we teach writing, and we need to think about how we teach rather than adding just more writing to it. And I think that having these kind of strict rubrics is kind of putting our learning into boxes, and yeah, so thinking about how we teach writing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jamie Wilson, and my daughter Sydney spoke earlier, and I'll be really brief. I just wanted to take a minute to speak about the mandatory 9th grade health requirement. As everyone has said tonight, high school is a time when children get to choose their courses for the first time, but this choice has been incredibly diminished. And it's sad that they have to forego lunch, and that they're actually being advised to forego lunch by their guidance counselors or by the adults in this room. That's the last thing I want to know, is that that's the choice that my daughter is given, is don't just, take all these great classes, just don't have lunch. And as she said, she will be here till 9 o'clock. The thing she didn't say is, then she'll come home and do her homework. There's no break for them. And we all know they're horribly overscheduled, and this is a horrible message. Also, ironically, in this PowerPoint, we said, developing a high school program that provides students with choices that support interest and rigor. You're not supporting their interest when you're taking those choices away. You're actually now doing the opposite. The PowerPoint says one thing, but now you're saying to them, but you have less choices because this is what you need to do this year. And for the first time, we're doing it on your grade. You're going to be the test here for this. And it's wrong on so many levels. You don't want to send this message to these students who've come here this year, this session and last session, to tell you that this is upsetting to them, that this is disturbing to them, that they're already overscheduled. And Robin, I wrote this down earlier, she described the community, it's the beauty of our community in Irvington High School. It's why we're here, and many of us chose to live here, are these choices. We hope so many voice a concern that we'll be met with a productive solution that works for all of our students. And it's true, and I just feel telling the students, okay, you could take 10th grade Latin, you could take art, you could take music, but just don't take lunch. That's not a productive solution for our students. And I'm not minimizing health here, but I feel this new restriction and the solution just sends a message to our kids who want to take an elective plus a language will need to do so at the detriment to their well-being. Because I can't believe anyone would advocate them going all day without a break, then going to extracurriculars, then going home and doing homework. It seems on top of this overscheduled life that you have an overwhelming majority of parents. I know that in the 11 years I've been here, I've never felt compelled to come here, except for tonight. I know that my phone has been ringing off the hook for days with parents of incoming 9th graders who feel the exact same way, that they've been texting me, how's it going? Okay, what's happening tonight? Well, the choice is in your hands, but I could tell you, if you sent out a Survey Monkey tonight about this choice and saying your children could do this, but they can't take lunch, I think this room will be packed next time. So, and I think you'll have a lot of really unhappy community members who chose to come here, who chose to live here for these schools.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Robin Powell. I have a daughter who is entering 9th grade, and I have a question. I don't know if anyone's asked this, is that if you have a student who will be in honors English, does that student have to take this every other day English course? Because what is going to happen with my daughter is she's going to give up on the music program because she wants to take Latin and she wants to take art. And she's going to have to give up on band. And she's been playing flute all along, and that's a choice that I don't think she really wants to make, but that's something she's going to have to make because of this mandatory English class and this very much suggested health course that she should take her freshman year. And she took advanced art in 8th grade so that she could have the electives and follow and take what she wanted to in art. That was what she did. So she was trying to open up as many opportunities for herself, and it sounds like they are closing. So is that an option for a child who is accepted into the honors English program to, let's say, forego taking that every other day English class?
Answer that question?
No, that had not been a consideration. All 9th graders. I'm sorry? All 9th graders have been signed up to take the writing course.
I don't know if, Jill Rembar again, just to finish, I don't know if Robin meant that it's a good idea to excuse or potentially excuse the honor students from that, but if we're, a high-functioning school district, and that seems like a good idea to me, the same as offering different electives where writing could be learned. So I had two quick things. I'm sorry that Raina left, because maybe this one's a question for her. But when my daughter graduated in 2010, neither my daughter nor any of her cohort learned how to write a thesis statement in their whole career in Irvington. They learned how to write an introductory paragraph, which was whatever the instruction was for the first sentence, 2 or 3 body sentences, and then a third summary sentence. But they never, ever learned how to develop a thesis. So I just wonder if anybody here knows in what grade, and maybe the kids could speak to this, in what grade they learn really how to develop a thesis statement in a thoughtful paper. We're talking about learning how to think. Anybody? Do you mind? I mean, I'd love to know, because you know what? If the board doesn't know and the administration can't answer, I mean, I would love it. I know it's not normal for people to talk to each other like that, but I just think it's such an important question. When do they learn how to write a thesis statement? Is it in this 9th grade class? Is it some other time? I mean, that's a critical thing. That's what my daughter went to college without knowing how to do. Okay. And when does it happen?
The board obviously doesn't know that.
Right.
Sorry?
The board obviously doesn't know that. But.
Can we, thank you, Jill. Thank you. Was there another?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. Well, I would like to know that. And if nobody knows the answer, I would say rip out the whole English program, dump the 9th grade class, because if they're not learning how to write a thesis statement before 9th grade, it's really a sorry mess. And I would like to have a re-vote on I would like, you guys to vote tonight on taking away the health requirement, which people are trying really hard not to call a requirement, and taking away the ELA and here's my question about the writing course. And I hope there's a good answer to this. If not, I think you should scrap everything. And I wish the board would vote on it. But my question about the writing course is this. Just as for any other course, normally I expect that when a course is developed and instituted, there's a curriculum with plans. Maybe the teachers write individual lesson plans, but there are learning objectives. There are statements of the outcomes that are expected at the end. And then there are assessments throughout the course. So I would expect, but maybe I'm mishearing, but I don't hear about the assessments that are in place for the writing course, other than the students say the best thing is learning steps of the research process, or the small size of the class helps. Those aren't assessments. So I think that generally, I mean, even like whatever you think of ed school or how teachers teach, generally seems to me when you have a course, in your curriculum, it comes with assessments. Along the way, formative assessment, assessments like how are they doing, and then how did they do? Are there assessments here that can tell us that? I'm hearing something else. And Arena, when you were out of the room, I asked what grade the kids learn how to develop a real, thoughtful thesis statement.
So I would say in 5th grade, our students, I'm looking for some of my 5th graders. Yes. So in 5th grade, you learned. Right.
A claim is, I'll ask you later.
Yes. So 5th grade is where the students really, it's directed, it's specific teaching that is part of the 5th grade.
Since when?
My daughter's in there right now. She's learning it.
Yeah. It's been several, I mean, I don't, certainly not when Anna was there, but I would say, Cindy, what year are you in now?
8th.
So I would say at least 5 years. I'm not, more than that. I would say 7 years.
Okay. So my other question was about assessments in the writing course.
Right. Do you want to just, she asked about assessments in the writing course.
Sure. So the teachers are assessing all the time. So if I misspoke before, they have units of study, and for each unit of study, the students have to, or it's a writing assignment, and they use the writing to assess the kids. So I'm not sure what you're asking, Jill.
Well, I think one of the questions early in the evening was, how's the program going? Is it doing what we want it to do? How can we judge the quality of the program, and are there assessments? And I was hearing, we don't have assessments. We're going to see if the kids like it. We're going to, we hope that they're going to do better over their high school career, but I didn't really hear anything solid about.
The kids are writing all year long, and
right.
And we're assessing the kids' writing. So I'm still not sure.
And how? Okay, so I think what I mean, yes, you're assessing the kids' writing, but when at this point, is there a way for the teachers or for somebody to bring to this meeting saying, we've been assessing the kids' writing, this is the kind of progress we're seeing, benchmarked against, this is where they started, this is where they are now, this is the progress that they've made? Because I think that we didn't hear this in the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, I think Jill Rayna is saying unequivocally yes.
Okay, I don't know why I missed that earlier.
But I said yes before too. I thought either one of you asked me.
I'm going to suggest that we adjourn for a moment. I'm sorry for our repeat speakers. It's just that we have a need for bathroom on the part of key people, including myself, the superintendent, Cashcom. So we're going to take a 5-minute adjournment. We'll be back at 20 of 10. Coming up with a new question that you're brief, right?
Yeah, I just want to read something that my brother had written for last meeting. It gets a little on the English program and the Latin program. If I could just read it, and then I'll be on my way. I'm going to bring this down a little. To whom it may concern, my name is Andy Weiss, and I'm an alumnus from 2007. I had the great privilege of being part of the Latin program for 4 years in my time at IHS. Having gone through the program, it saddens me to hear of the planned changes being implemented to the curriculum that will ultimately cause the Latin program to shrink and potentially end. The Latin program added so much more than just an ancient language to each participant's life. Learning about ancient civilization, as well as being surrounded by a group of people who were interested in and devoted to learning more than what was required of them, had tremendous impact on myself and others. I, to this day, am proud to tell people that I took Latin and always recite the first paragraph of Caesar that I was taught in 11th grade by Miss Sella. Needless to say, it will always impress people. It always impresses people. I would end by mentioning that Latin has a tremendous practical benefits in terms of teaching students English grammar, something that sadly doesn't get done properly through an English curriculum, which makes the situation itself ironic. I urge you to please consider the repercussions of your actions here. The Latin program is one that has had lasting impact on me and thousands of others who walk the halls of IHS. Yours truly, Andy Weiss, IH class of 07. And just 4 quick points that I forgot to mention my other one. Ms. Marinello mentioned saying you check the classes every so often. Maybe check it a little more. I know each class is definitely different. Maybe just maybe if you have it, let's say once a month, maybe once every 3 weeks. Just a suggestion. And use the 42 minutes that I get currently. It works on my quality, the quality of my work rather than the quantity, and I feel that's important. Also about the health program thing, that you have to take it in 9th grade. I'm taking it as a 10th grader, and I'm perfectly fine. I'm passing health, I'm passing high school, and that's all I have to say. Closing comment.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you to your brother, Andy.
Della Lenz again. Just very, very quick. I think over and over we've talked about assessment, and that hasn't really been quantified. What I'm asking the board is, what does this assessment include? What is the projected knowledge gained? Will that knowledge be any different in having the writing as opposed to having our current curriculum? Adding quantity to our current curriculum, how has that benefited our children? And has it limited their options for other areas? I would also ask for measurable knowledge gained with validated tools for the writing class, the double block, the Latin, and the current English, to see where is the knowledge being gained, and actual assessments with projected knowledge, not just get better. It's too, I think we as parents see the get better as very vague, and it doesn't really reflect what we're seeing. And that's it. Oh, and I also asked the board and the school, it may be a great idea to take other classes into the writing, but I'm old school, and I think it should be the other way around, where the history teacher should be correcting a person's English. Science teacher should be correcting the student's English. Every class I ever took, I had circle, SP, capital, period, run-on sentence. It wasn't just an English class. So if that's the approach that you're taking, I think the focus should actually be in the subject matter. And thank you. That was quick.
Thank you, Dell.
I had one last question. Do you want one more?
One thing that disturbed me, and I think that in the survey you need to address, is the student who said that having a tutor was what benefited her and allowed her to excel. So one of the questions, and I know that the feeling may be a little misguided, that it's somehow cultural, but nobody I know is spending $100 an hour minimum for a tutor for their kids that are not struggling. So one of the questions that I would strongly point out, ask about a tutor or any outside resource.
It's a good call. Thank you.
Okay, my last question is just based on having listened to people talk tonight. What is English? What is English supposed to do? It just seems so strange to me that somehow all of the things that we used to think was English in the way of learning how to use your, to define words, have vocabulary, work on grammar, diagram sentences. I mean, the things that we were taught when we were younger are the precise things that you're hearing kids say they were missing. It seems to me that the way I defined English, and many people defined English, is what Latin is. So what is English? I don't understand. And it does scare me, and the person who said gut English, it's like, well, what is English doing for our kids right now? I'm not saying that it's not doing anything, but I'd like to know, why is it that all these areas are falling by the wayside and we have to prop them up with extra classes? As I said before, I'm not opposed to extra writing. I think they should be writing all the time, and they should be writing a lot all the time. But why isn't English teaching English? Why is Latin teaching English? So, you know, I'm not trying to accuse anybody of anything. I really would like to know, and it seems like everybody here tonight wants to know why, what fell through, and when did it fall through, and how do we build it back?
Thank you.
So I really just wanted to touch on some of the things that were said, and some different speakers had addressed certain points and how to respond to them. So to start with, and I wanted to talk about how other classes have been influenced by Latin and not just English, because over the 4 years that I've taken Latin, it's helped me a lot in French. It's helped me a lot with world history and AP Worlds, which was a course that was definitely a tough one for me. I managed to get a 5 on the AP because I feel like I had a lot of knowledge on Roman culture, Greek culture, and certain things like that I really wouldn't have had without the Latin program. And that it really made it so like certain things like that didn't even have to be taught because everyone knew them because we just worked on them in Latin. And then how I want to talk about how in college I'm actually planning on pursuing more foreign languages, specifically Romance languages like Italian, because I really want to study abroad in Italy during my 4 years. So I think that Latin is really what's motivated me to go to Italy, to learn about ancient things. Like Rome is just such a great area for anyone who's either a classicist, a historian, anyone like that would really want to work there. And then so we talked about a little bit about extracurriculars and how what might be affected. So someone like me, I've been really extracurricularly involved. Specifically, I've been, I was, over the 4 years of high school, I became the president of the mock trial team. I started a new club with a friend. I'm the vice president of a club called JSA, Junior Statesmen of America. I've been a member of the CBF Planning Committee, and I've been part of the CBF group over the past 2 years. And I've been a part of the Latin Club and Investment Club for the past 4 years, and Latin Club in particular has been one that's been really effective for me. And through Latin, I actually participated in the spelling bee for 3 years, which was something that I really never would have partaken in, and it was really something that I thought was really awesome, and it's like a really excellent experience that I wouldn't have had without it. Also, I've been a part of the varsity soccer team, and I'm actually planning to continue playing soccer in college at Binghamton, and I play outside of school also. In addition to that, I played baseball for 2 years, and in the past in the past season, I was the captain of the winter track and spring track teams. So I've been very involved, and with stuff like Latin, if you're adding like the workload of an extra writing class, which is really just a lot of quantity, it's something that I wouldn't have been able to get done. And over the 4 years, I've struggled to get a lot of homework done because I've been overexerting myself in so many different means. And I also wanted to touch base on what Latin, like how difficult it is if you're not in that freshman Latin class, because really there's no way to actually become a part of the program in your sophomore year if you're starting, because the best you can do is to hope to double down on Latin and try to skip a year, which is really nearly impossible. I had a friend try to do it because he realized after his first year he really wanted to be part of the Latin program. So he goes into Latin, and he was like, he tried his best, but he really couldn't skip the year. So he ended up staying in Latin, but was behind a year and was never able to take the AP or the honors Latin, which is something that I valued a lot and was a great experience for me. And lastly, I wanted to talk about I was another student who didn't take health in 9th grade. I took health in 10th grade, and it was really something that I think benefited me a lot, because in 9th grade, there's so much to adjust to coming into high school, and having that free period that I took was really something that really de-stressed me, it relaxed me, and my best grades over the course of the 4 years came in my freshman year, because I had a lot of, I was adjusting, and it would have been a tough period had I not had this extra free time, and had I not had a class like Latin to get me through the day. So as a whole, I feel like we really need to preserve the Latin and other programs like engineering, which was something that I really wanted to take, but I didn't want to put myself in the time with that, knowing that I had such a tight schedule, like something like today, where I went to my internship. I left home at 7:30 because I am working on Wall Street for my internship. And then I ended up leaving early a bit, so I've got an hour and a half commute back to come to track practice at 4 o'clock. And then after track practice, I go straight to soccer practice. And then after soccer practice, I came here. So pretty much every day is really something that needs to be focused on, and every day adding this extra work might not be the best, especially for someone like me. I feel like it really would have changed me, and learning Latin over 4 years is not something, the value of that is not something that I can quantify personally. It's just beyond my means of expression. So I just wanted to say that I'm open to any questions you guys have, or anything about different programs and different ways that I've been impacted, and anything really.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I think you should run for school board.
Do we have any other repeat question? We have a first timer.
I'm Oliver Schwartz. I'm in 7th grade, and I just wanted to talk about the choices in my learning, which is that I like having choice and like freedom in my learning, and my the choices that I can make at school. I like having those, and I know that having like a uniform like school day that we're told what to do and how to like write our essays, and we're giving outlines, like doesn't make school that interesting, and the choices that we're given are what makes school like interesting. I just got into studio art, and I'm excited because I was able to choose to be a part of that, and that like makes me feel unique, I guess. And I know that from like discussions with my peers at lunch, which is a necessary period, my periods like to be different and unique in their learning too, and they like having choices, and when we're given like uniform requirements in school, we don't like those as much.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I think we may be done with questions. Any comments?
Two
from-
comments based on
Please.
everything?
Yeah.
Um,
You're going to sum up all those
No,
comments?
no, I just, two things really strike me, and one is, I've said it before, but I'm just gonna say it again as a board member, is, it just, given the comments that everyone's made about Latin, I think we really should consider the possibility of taking Latin down to a lower grade, just because of all the benefits of Latin and all the accolades that everyone speaks with. I think when we look to extend world language, if we look to do that, then I think Latin should definitely play a role in that, or at least be considered to play a role. I mean, there's all these studies also that link Latin to, as these students have said, being better at other foreign languages, doing better on standardized tests. There's just reams of information. And then the other thing that really strikes me is just gets back to us efficient use of our resources and how we spend. And for some reason tonight, it really struck me about how much English our kids are really getting. I mean, we are spending a lot of money in terms of, classes that our kids sit in English from 6th grade to 9th grade. Probably, I would say probably more than almost any other school in Westchester. And I think we really need to take a step back and say, how efficient are we spending? And, is this the right way to spend our dollars, to spend it all on English? I mean, maybe we should be spending less on English and looking for where we get a bigger bang for the buck. In other words, it's quality, not quantity. And I'm concerned about it. I never really thought about just the number of hours our kids spend in English classes in those few years. So that's it.
Thank you.
I think it's just been great to have people come and talk to us, and I just think it's hugely beneficial for the board to hear from parents and students, and we typically get that, we're much more likely to get that from the high school or the middle school, but it's I think we tend to operate in isolation more than is ideal, and it's great to have this kind of feedback. I think a few thoughts, and it's a lot to think about and process, but I think I've said this before, and I continue to think that we need to think much more about the quality of our English instruction rather than the quantity. And I think we have too much quantity and not enough quality. From my both firsthand experiences, well, secondhand, and from everything else I hear. What else? I guess the one little tidbit that some people keep bringing up that I think we ought to, aside from I think we really owe it to ourselves to have a bigger picture look at that quantity versus quality trade-off in English, which is not just a 9th grade issue, but it's also a middle school issue. And we're hearing a lot about how that middle school extra period is not, at least here, it's obviously a small sample, but it's just maybe a self-selected sample, but of people who don't feel like it's time well spent. So I think that's something I hope that the board will think about taking on. The one little tidbit that maybe ought to be thought about sooner rather than later is this idea that a number of people have brought up, which is giving honors English students the option of substituting Latin for that writing class. And that seems like a pretty easy thing to do. A lot of them probably already take Latin, I guess, especially if half the class is signed up, half of the 9th grade is signed up for it, half of the incoming 9th grade is signed up for it. But I hope this is stuff that the board will take a look at. I think the board should be looking at these kind of academic and curricular issues, and I'd like to see it begin to look at this stuff. The two of you who are remaining on the board, as well as the two of you over there, I hope that includes you, we'll think about it.
Thank you, John. think, did you guys have any comments? I think the key word for me is flexibility, that we need to have a more flexible approach so that possibly we can consider, you know, what John brought up in terms of a different approach for honor students. But, you know, the bigger word that kind of includes a lot of different opportunities and really addresses the issue of freedom of choice that the students themselves spoke to, is about the need for flexibility so that students that are very self-directed and have an enormous passion for learning can somehow capitalize on that without a restrictive, unnecessarily restrictive approach. That's what we heard. That's what I heard. I think you guys have to go and consider this, and we need to have a follow-up discussion again. But I think the key thing is that we need to also manage expectations that this may not happen for next year, because certain things are already in place and will be difficult to undo in a matter of weeks because people are setting their schedules for next year.
Yeah, I think the latter point you make is something that we have to pay mind to. I think we need to certainly step back and reflect on the conversation, reflect on the questions that have been asked, but then for administration to do its diligence and not only look to come up with some methods to evaluate the program now, but to look at what those longer term benchmarks would be. I think, you know, other considerations can grow out of some of those findings and that subsequent dialogue. But I think it's fair to say it would be quite the challenge for us to be able to change direction right now for next year for a number of reasons: program, staffing, scheduling, curriculum. It would be very challenging. It could lead to some real complexities in preparing for the school year. But we'll certainly have those conversations. You know, I guess in some kind of closing thoughts, like John said, it's nice to have everybody here and to see so many folks speak passionately to a subject. To our students who really truly articulated your passion and your experiences so well. Kudos to you and all of your success, and it makes us proud, even though coming in and being critical of something that we're leading, it's nice to see our students have a voice around this and do so in such a passionate, articulate manner. You know, as we set into this, I would just want to reiterate things that we said going back a few weeks ago. There was never effort to have a negative impact on Latin or other options that were available to our students. In our high school presentation, which it looks as if we made table now because of the hour, in there we talk about building programs and trying to create structures and systems in the high school that will permit our students to be able to take different types of classes they haven't in the past. So where this may be one example where there's some concern, I think Dave and Deb, when they have the opportunity to speak, are going to be able to highlight how they're building sequences and courses that are actually going to expand opportunities for kids to take classes and to be able to fit different types of classes into their schedules. So we're really looking at trying to really expand experiences for kids. You know, in that effort, sometimes you can have unintended consequence, and we certainly did not want to upset folks here. We are trying to enhance ELA, English experiences for all of our students. You know, I from the bottom of my heart, I feel so passionate about the level of experience we provide our children. We want our kids to have a rigorous experience where we're providing them with a solid foundation. And yes, some of that starts in the elementary school, but then there's pieces where we look to our high school where we have to align. And we set high standards, we look at that endpoint, and we want our kids to be well prepared for college. We want our kids to go to the most competitive colleges. Well, what does that endpoint look like? What does that profile of a student have to be to hit those objectives? And recognize we can say that generically, but we could have 5, 10, 100 different profiles. But what does that look like? But we have to build from both ends, and we have to meet in the middle. When I think of the work that we've done in this school district for the past 3 years, the work Raina, our instructional leaders, our principals, our teachers. It has been about improving instruction. It has been about improving curriculum. We've done a tremendous amount of work in 3 years. It's not necessarily the pretty or the glamorous work, but I can tell you it's getting done. I can tell you that we are going to see results. I think we look at some experiences and a question, kids can point to in 5th grade, we learned to write a thesis statement. There's going to be a lot more of those stories to tell. So we're committed to providing a rigorous program for all of our kids, one that is going to broaden horizons, open doors of opportunity. Somewhere along the line, so we make difficult decisions. And we make decisions where not always people are going to be happy, but we try to make those decisions in an informed manner. But when we step back, we got to make sure that when we made those decisions that they're working out for us. And we're making that commitment that we're going to evaluate it. We're going to make that commitment that we're going to continue to have dialogue about this throughout the rest of this year and with the future board. So I think it's the first of many conversations such as this. But hopefully we're going to have a lot more foresight and being able to plan the dialogue rather than being reactive to the consequence and concern. So,
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our follow-up to the May 5th meeting. I think our plan now is to table the Irvington High School presentation that Dave and Deb were going to do. We will most likely present that at our next board meeting, but we kind of have to look at the schedule. So can I have a motion to table 4.2, the high school presentation?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. And again, apologies to anybody who wanted to hear that now at 10:05, but it's just not being fair to Dave and Deb. And then that brings us to our discussion of the student representative to the board, which Ms. Kerner asked to add to our agenda tonight. Do you want to kick us off, Robin?
Yeah, I mean, it was two things. I mean, one is it's an idea that I think we've talked about briefly on and off. I do know that there's a regulation that talks about if you're going to call it a student liaison, you need to have a vote by the public to create a student liaison position. So clearly that we would have to wait until next year if that was to be put on the ballot. I guess the sitting board would decide. However, I guess my question to Gus, since he's there, would be, is there a way to informally create a dialogue between, a group of students or a few students and the sitting board, not call it a liaison position, but enable there to be conversation throughout the year on a regular basis? I don't know the answer to that. It seems like it might be a legal thing. The student liaison seems like it would be, it even said you'd have to identify, like, okay, if you identify the position, then you could say it's the student body president, or you could either pick a different person, have a person appointed, or have it be something that's existing. But I'm thinking, is there a way in the interim to create a dialogue on an ongoing basis between the board and a student or students?
I'm not aware of any legal mechanism to do so. I guess it depends upon the topic. What it is that you're going to require of the students.
What is her
Touch on
appointment?
employees, touch on confidential student information. So it really depends upon what it is that you require of the student, in what form. This could be an exec session. The Board of Education has the right to invite anybody they deem fit to an executive session.
So the board,
on a particular topic.
Okay.
So I don't know of any legal mechanism to do so, and like I said, just a little bit more background in terms of what it is that you'd be talking to them about and introducing them about.
It sounds like the key to it may be setting up an informal process, and and then the part that has to be formal is obviously how the students are being chosen, right?
Right.
Because it can't be, Bob's son and,
It won't.
Right. Right, but, there has to be a process to that.
Right,
Right.
right. Or unless it's just an interaction with the student body government until there's a formal, I don't know. But I was just hoping to get that ball rolling and get there to be more of an open dialogue between the two groups.
I think
I can look into it further, that's just off the top of my head.
I think we can look into, obviously, you identified, Robin, the legal parameters around developing a formal student liaison position, but we can reach out to some other school districts to see what other informal structures exist. You know, that idea of coffee and conversation, town hall kind of things, you know, things like that. I think things like that could be done possibly informally.
Right.
So I think we could, you know, Gus could look into the legal parameters around things, which I think what you're seeking is, let's just kind of extend the olive branch, let's have dialogue, and we can look to see maybe what some other districts.
I almost think more informal would be more productive, to be honest. I think
Anybody have an
formal is
objection?
going to be hard.
I don't think anybody has an objection.
Yeah, so I'll start to.
We're not
reach
really
out.
proposing anything particular,
Actually,
yeah.
Elaine sent something out to like all of her fellow cohorts to see what other districts do. It seemed like from those who responded, the majority do not have a position like that, but the ones who do have some sort of student liaison position, it's more informal.
How did you hear that? Did you?
No, and having a
okay.
conversation, when you were in the office, when we were having a conversation, she just informally just asked other district clerks, you know, what do you guys do?
Yeah,
It was informal. It seemed like the majority of the people who had some sort of position, it was more kind of what existed years ago prior to me being on the board, where student representatives came to a meeting. It seemed like the majority once a month came reporting what was going on at the high school. Some stayed for the meeting, but the majority of them left.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the board then, and my feeling was it was fine. It was that was more of a one-way, like, here's what we're doing. And
I'm just telling you what other districts are doing.
Yeah.
That's just, you know, is.
I think you're looking for more of a dialogue and an exchange.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought there was a provision in the policy, I don't know where I saw it, I thought I saw it in our policies, for us to have a non-voting student representative sit on the board.
It's on the agenda. It's on.
It reflects the law, which says that it has to be by voter referendum.
So that actually would need to be approved, even though the person would not vote.
And there are parameters.
Right. I'm sure.
Oh, they're not voting on personnel issues, et cetera.
Well,
We're not voting anyway.
It's very explicit. Yeah.
The individual
Lucky them.
must be a senior and must have attended the high school at least 2 years prior to selection. There are a myriad of ways that you could actually select the individual, from student body election to selection by the superintendent or majority vote of the board. There are issues such as what is the term going to be, what is the length of the term going to be for the student.
No, no more than a year if they're a senior.
But there are a variety of ways to approach it.
We hope.
There are also hard and fast rules in terms of what that individual can do.
Yeah, okay. And I guess would we want to have one whatever format, would be a single person, would it be multiple people, would it be the same people, or a rotating group of people? Would we only be talking to high school students, or would we also want to talk to middle school students too? You know, those are a number of the issues we ought to be thinking about.
All right, so we will close that matter for now. And I think we're going to actually skip to the appointment of Deb Marinello, so she may leave. So that's 9.2 in our agenda. So congratulations to Deb. May I have a motion to appoint Ms. Marinello as the principal of the Dow's Lane School?
So moved. Beat you to it.
No, I beat you to it.
All right, I'll give it to Cashkin.
Oh,
second.
Oh, then you got the second? That wasn't fair. You didn't ask for a second.
Oh, yeah, all right, fine. May I have a second?
Go ahead.
Second.
We can all be in favor right now.
Aye.
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 Congratulations.
Go home.
Just procedurally, for a few seconds here, we have two Dow's Lane principals, but we'll have to get rid of the first.
Oh, that's true.
Well,
Yeah.
the appointment is effective July.
Fortunately, the school's closed now, so it doesn't really matter.
No, it's effective July 1, so.
Oh, we're okay, good.
We're
good,
okay.
We're okay.
That's what we need.
On
lawyers
top
on
of it,
the
John.
board.
I was well ahead of you on that, John. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nicholas is in second grade next year. God bless you.
Good night.
Good night. I actually did skip over comments from the community. We've been having lots of comments. Are there any other comments that anybody else would like to add?
About other agenda items.
Yes. Della's thinking.
No, you're the only unaffiliated.
Okay, all right, fine. We will move on to our consent agenda. So this is an opportunity to comment on things in the consent agenda. So this includes items 7.1 to 7.9, items 8.1, and then 9.1, and then 9.3 to 9.11, because we just did 9.2, right, Elaine? And then we have our business office matters 10.1 and 10.4. Before we...
10.5.
Mine says 10.4.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but it's either 10.4 or 10.5. Is anybody going to vote no on anything in there, because we'll take it out altogether? I mean, because we can discuss it.
Which are we taking out?
Well, let me try to explain. 7.9, the last minutes, I actually decided I should read these minutes, which I did on the train fast. There wasn't a minutes attached to the last one, so I couldn't read it. So I guess I would vote no to approving something that wasn't there, at least when I tried to look at it.
Yes, let's just remove 7.9.
Yeah, so
7.9. Yeah, the minutes weren't attached to that on the April 21st minutes.
So table 7.9?
At least not when I tried to access them. Maybe they were other times.
Right, so our consent agenda then is 7.1 to 7.8.
Yeah.
And then as I stated previously, can I have a motion to accept our consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, now, any discussion on any of these items? Obviously, we have this very important meaty resolution in here on the APPR plan resolution that came from the Westchester Putnam School Board Association. Any other comments on?
I have none.
None? John, Robin? Nope? Okay.
Not me.
All in favor of this consent agenda as amended earlier?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I passed it around. Yep, well ahead of you there.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, I
Robin,
didn't.
you had it last,
It's
right?
there,
Oh, it's there.
but I didn't sign it because I felt like I needed to look at the numbers.
And I believe that takes
oh,
us
that's-
to
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait.
item 12, since we have no other comments from the community, which would be, oh, you did have one more comment? Yep.
The approval of extra compensation, I'm just curious, I don't need to know the details, but why, with the budget just approved, why was that not included in the budget that was put out to vote?
This is for the project Lead the Way, right?
For 9.10?
Yeah, 9.10, exactly.
We didn't know about it before the budget?
We did. What do you,
I think it's in the budget. It does, just because it's, we have to approve their compensation. Just because it means extra doesn't mean it's outside the budget.
right.
It's in the budget.
So
We budgeted, we had a whole,
is it additional compensation?
it's additional compensation that's mandated by the contract.
By summer work.
But it was already put
the budget.
into the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
And then, so that takes us to our board discussion, which would include the item that Ms. Kerner brought up at the beginning. And I guess, again, do you want to just kick that off, the question
Yeah.
that you had?
There is a regulation, section 100.11, that calls for the participation of parents and teachers in school-based planning and decision-making. And there's a plan, which I actually asked Elaine if we had one, and she sent it to me right away. It is by law supposed to be updated every 2 years. I believe the last time we updated it was 2012. And the other thing, if you read through the plan, it's a plan on paper, but we're not actually executing to the way it's described in here. And to the best that I could tell from talking to people as well, it seems like site committees were originally created as a result of this regulation, but they were then created to be decision-making bodies, which presented to the board on a regular basis the decisions that they came to in a variety of these areas, instruction.
What's the policy number for us, our policy?
It's
It's
on
not
the
a policy,
website
it's a
under
New
parents and
York State law.
students. It's right there.
Yeah.
It's right on the front of it.
So in instruction, curriculum, school community relationships, facilities, staff development, and budget, there's supposed to be decision-making groups that consist of teachers and parents and administrators, not board members. And they are then supposed to make these decisions and then present to the board on a regular basis. So it was concerning that, this is not at all what we're doing. It is not at all what site committees have evolved into. And the fact that we do need to file a plan with the state and have it be something that we follow is something important that I think we really need to look into and quickly.
Yeah, there's no question, and Robin, thank you for bringing it to our attention. And my understanding, the intent of this grew out of, state initiative years ago, and I don't know of any accountability mechanism where the state looks for this, that they ask for them. My understanding is regulation it's on the books but isn't enforced. And so now that it has been brought to our attention, we'll sit down and map out a plan to go through and to review the plan and to take the necessary steps to renew it in an appropriate fashion and to make sure what we have is consistent with what's required for law, and that we make sure that we're acting in a way that's in the spirit of the regulation.
Right, and so in other words, we need to take a look at site committees and kind of revisit their purpose. And just to read to the regulation, it says the purpose of this law was, the purpose of school-based planning and shared decision-making shall be to improve the educational performance of all students in the school, ... So, obviously, in theory, the government really believes that parents and teachers and administrators together are actually going to be beneficial to the district overall. And, I'm a big believer in that. I think the more we all work together, the better we can make it for everybody. So that's kind of, I don't even know how I stumbled upon this, but I did.
I have to say, when I read this, when you brought this to Elaine's attention, was it last week, the week before? I sit on two of those committees, the safety committee and the food wellness, what do we call the other, food committee? They actually satisfy some of these.
They don't, because board members aren't allowed to be part of them.
It says that a board member can't be part of it?
If you read the law, because the whole purpose is that the teachers and the administrators and the parents should come to decisions and bring it to the board, and the board ultimately makes the decision. The board not required to take their decisions, but I think the purpose is to just get the communication going between those entities, not with a board member.
So then going forward, a board member doesn't have to sit on those two things like I have been for the past 4 years.
But I think
But
site committees.
Well, but you
what I'm
can
saying is
continue now, because you're leaving
There
the
you go.
board.
But what I'm saying is, it's community, it's teachers, it's.
Yeah, but that wouldn't also address like curriculum and instruction.
No,
and
I
everything
just
comes
said
back,
two
yeah.
of these.
Two of them, yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
I think we get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Curriculum.
So we're going to look at it and
Look at
come
us.
up with a plan to address it.
They ask the schools.
Thank you for the observation, Robin.
For the areas that you will have.
So our next board meeting is June 2nd at 7:30. That's next Tuesday. And now we're going to go into executive session again for the purpose of discussing employment history of particular persons. Can I have that motion, please, to move into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.